Right, as I was saying, so it's important for us. I Last week we asked the question, what is Caribbean or what is Caribbean thought and who determines this? And I was saying that who determines this part of that question is a very provocative addition to the question. It's a very critical, it makes the question of what is or who is anything critical and who determines this. And because the who determines is important, especially to the post-colonial thinker. Very important. And as I said, as we talk about the whole issue of Caribbean and the fact that we're vulnerable, open to exogenous shock, and our past determines our present, and then we are also part of a cog, part of a bigger wheel, part of where the external continue to and affect the realities of our position today, which is also part of the Black position. Yes, part of the Black position. So we talk about that. We talk about that. Very important. Very important. We talk about that. And so when we say who determines this is important because we say we are free and we're independent, but are we really free and are we really independent? And so today's lecture is very important because it is within a broader situation, because Caribbean thought is not Jamaica thought. We're not just, yes, we are in Jamaica and we're at the Jamaica Theological Seminary, but I want as Caribbean people to not just think about, and especially Jamaica has this kind of American kind of a way about us. We think, well, just as our America, we are still caught up in the broader milieu of exceptional thinking. We're still caught up in exceptional thinking. I was actually one of my professors gave me this magazine to read. Very beautiful magazine. It's a magazine that's leaning left and right. The left-leaning magazine called Jacobin. And there's a book, a famous and most powerful intellectual book written by C.L.R. James, which we are going to get into later on. Powerful book written by C.L.R. James. But talk about Jacobin. But the issue of who determines this is very important. Who determines this? And Bob, I remember who's in the movie Who Shot the Sheriff. Bob Marley says, We are not Marxists and we're not capitalists. And I referenced that some time ago. We're not Marxists and we're not capitalists. We're not Marxists and we're not capitalists. Yet the students in their conceptualization of the post-Caribbean thought, who determines it? Very important, critically. Who determines this? Who determines this? Is it our reality that determines this? So this is important. And not only that, but why is it important? And I'm not even going to say that. I'm not going to get into that. Notice I'm not getting into stuff right now. Because of how I am. I'm presenting the lecture as if I'm writing. This is the preface, as the summary, as some of the juice that we're about to get into. It's going to be juicy. It's going to be provocative. It's going to be critical today. There's much happening in the world. I happen to be the host and creator of a podcast, a news commentary podcast called the Neoliberal Round. And it's in video and in audio. And we carry some of the lectures. And I had an opportunity to interview for one of the latest episodes of the Neoliberal Round. Brian, and if some of you follow me, and if you follow me, follow my feed, subscribe to my show, you might see some of this. Brian Concanon, the executive director of the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, the US-based company. And I interviewed him recently. Powerful interview. And you guys, and we hope, it's not released yet. I did it yesterday, or the day before yesterday, but it's been uploaded, but it's because we made it into a production. It's taking some time to be uploaded. Powerful about what's going on in Haiti. And last week, some of you are talking, when we define our countries in Jamaica is the third largest, and there's a sense of pride being one of the leading countries and so on and so forth. But sometimes that's what has dogged us, the Caribbean. That's what has dogged us, this exceptionalism, this competitive spirit. That's what affected in 1958, when we were supposed to have one union. But instead, we have all these different countries in the Caribbean because some nationalists they didn't want to share power with the other Caribbean powers. So who's going to lead? Jamaica, Trinidad, Guyana, Barbados, who's going to lead? And the next thing, and of course, the next thing you know, we all have different countries. But anyway, we won't get into that. Those are some of the things we're going to contend for, but we're going to also get into Haiti. Because the Haiti situation speaks to the Caribbean situation. It speaks to the Black position. Haiti situation is a very interesting situation. And I released some breaking news. And I wrote an article as well. I just released an article about summarizing some of the discussions. But it's breaking news about what's going on and also what's going on with Jamaica. Maybe some of you might know what's going on. I want you guys to comment on that news, what's going on in Jamaica as it relates to this news about Jamaica considering of sending troops to Haiti. I call it an invasion because it's an invasion because the people don't want, the people are not inviting anybody. The prime minister is inviting troops, peacekeeping troops, what he called peacekeeping troops, but the prime minister is not democratically elected. The prime minister was installed by the US, by the US, or I call him the coup d'etat. Okay? So it was not, so therefore, if he's not democratically elected, he's installed by some external country, and the Haitians don't want others. So what is that? That's an invasion? I guess we can debate that. But it's happened, so it promises to be great. It's 6:31. We're going to get into the lecture, and we have 17 persons today. It's going to be powerful. So thank you so much for joining in. This is going to be powerful. So we're going to get into the lecture today, and we're going to do quite a few things. And we talk about socialism, and nationalism, but there's one thing we don't talk about: capitalism. Like who can we point to in Jamaica or the Caribbean history that represents the capitalist arm of our development, of our political thinking? And I can think of no other person than Edward Seaga. Actually, I was looking for some news, and a lot of the thinkers that we have on the syllabus are from Trinidad. I was actually, a lot of them are from Trinidad, except I added some people on here. I added Rex Nettleford, who's from Jamaica. He wrote, and he's a theologian, and I added him on the list of thinkers that we need to consider. but we I added Bob Marley. He wasn't on the list, but he is a tremendous thinker. We have to have Bob Marley. Music is, when it comes down in terms of what Jamaica has added to the Caribbean experience, thinking experience, the music, reggae music. Music is a much part of our thinking. Music, especially in terms of pop culture helps to shape society. So but music is also influenced by religions and ideologies and consciousness, and what consciousness is behind reggae music. Rastafari, and that's why in Who Shot the Sheriff, and I'm not probably next week or week after next, we're going to play Who Shot the Sheriff, when he says, we're not Marxist, we're not capitalist, we're not but we Rastas. Of course, and many Jamaicans say, we're not Rastas, we're a Christian country. But when he said that, he wasn't saying that as if all of us are, but he was saying that no, we won't be, no one, the external won't define us. We won't be defined by the external, Marxism or socialism. We are a people who we will define ourselves. We will make ourselves. We will have a conception of ourselves, not the external. We are Rasta, and Rasta was something new. Rasta was something unique to Jamaica. There was no, you will not find Rastafarianism anywhere else. Where in its development, we talk about what contributions Jamaica made to Rastafarianism, to religion, or to religion, or to religious consciousness and religious thinking. Rastafari. It is that one thing that Jamaica as a people that we've contributed. Of course, in terms of some of the Obia, which is Obia, when you study Caribbean thought, then you have to study Obia. Today we're going to be contending for Haiti, because I say we're not just studying Jamaica. We talk about Haiti, thinking about voodoo. Talk about Jamaica, think about Obia as part of the dark arts. And that has helped, and maroon culture, especially, part of what has helped to shape the Obia in terms of Jamaican dark arts, and that kind, we call it dark arts. I should not use the word, that's discriminatory. Okay, so I won't use the word dark. Okay, but Obia, in terms of Obia, come from that maroonage culture. And when you start to study how the Maroons came to be, Maroons came about because the Spaniards that lived in Jamaica before the British came, in the 1500s, yes, before the British came in 1492, what happened was that the Spaniards had slaves. And when the Spaniards got driven out of Jamaica and the Caribbean by the British, the slaves that were there, they freed the slaves. And the slaves ran to the mountains. And that's how you have the Maroons. Okay? All right? And they kept and preserved a lot of some of their African traditions and so on. And the way they experienced slavery was different from the slave trade. Slave trade was more elaborate. The slave trade was systematic. Slavery existed long before that. But when you think about the slave trade, that was coupled with the European colonization, and so it was different from the kind of slavery that existed. Okay, so, but the question is, so last week we asked you guys to define Jamaica. And we asked you guys to define Jamaica. And you guys, and we lift up this book by Novella and Nelson Keith. a book written in 1992 that looks at the democratic origins, the social origins of democratic socialism in Jamaica. And they defined it as Jamaica is an island nation state situated 90 miles to the southwest of the southernmost tip of Cuba. A former British sugar colony, it has a population of about 2.3 million people. Unlike most other plantation economies, Jamaica has suffered from underdevelopment, which has led to discontent and unrest. And of course, we lift up this book last week. Now, I want to talk about this very important issue. We talk about structural adjustment in Jamaica. And I was reading this book written by Ramesh Ramsaran, The Challenge of Structural Adjustment in the Commonwealth Caribbean. The Challenge of Structural Adjustment in the Commonwealth Caribbean. And Ramsaran, a little bit about him, he's actually was a fellow, he's a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, or was a lecturer, I don't know if he's still alive, but he was a lecturer at the University of the West Indies. He was a lecturer at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad, the Trinidad campus. And so, but he wrote a very interesting book. And he began in the book by saying the structural adjustment issue is not surprisingly one surrounded by intense controversy and emotion. This is because it does not concern simply economic policies, or it does not concern simply economic policies or improving government performance, but brings into question basic economic philosophy and ideology, and may also involve the effective transfer of decision-making from local hands. Again, this is important. The structural adjustment issue is not surprisingly one surrounded by intense controversy and emotion. This is because it does not concern simply with economic policies or improving government performance. It does not concern itself simply with economic policies or improving government performance, but brings into question basic economic philosophy and ideology, and may also involve the effective transfer of decision-making from local hands. This is important as we get into the course today. And as group 2, please find that paper that I want you to share from today as we begin this course. This is a Trinidadian writing, Ramesh F. Ramsaran, the book, The Challenge of Structural Adjustment in the Commonwealth. Many Caribbean islands and West Indian countries got independence in the 1960s, early 70s, excluding Haiti. But when they got independence, it marked a very significant period in Caribbean history in terms of this drive for independence, for self-government of the people, by the people, for the people. It was a very significant period in the history of the Caribbean, as one after the other, these West Indian countries became independent, own government. Yet many of them retained the Queen as their head of state. But by the time they got independence, I'm gonna ask you guys to mute your mic, guys, okay? Please, Karen, please mute. Is that Karen? Somebody have their mic on? But by the time they got to independence, they were a government by the people, of the people, for the people, so on and so forth. By the time they got independence, they are met with globalization. Globalization is happening, And the kind of globalization that was happening was neoliberal globalization, where they have to liberalize. They have to open up their economies. They have to employ or apply strategies where they have to open up their economies. And it also meant changes to their exchange rate. They have to change their exchange rate, the currency value, and so on. By the time the 1970s happened, OPEC happened. And many of them, because they employ welfare policies, instead of developing their industrial capabilities, instead of developing the capital intensive capabilities, and many of them employ socialist capital, because you're coming out of the 1950s and you see the experience of the whitening and the browning and so on and so forth. So, they were, according to some people, that's what happened. And so by the 1970s, they don't have enough money remain. Not much money was left in the 1970s. So OPEC happened. OPEC raised. There was an oil crisis where OPEC reduced oil production, and when you reduce supply, it raises prices, and because demand can meet supply, and that affected Caribbean countries, and so now they have to be borrowing money, going to the IMF, and that was perfect, because who runs the IMF and these banks? Big banks, the IMF, IDB, World Bank, that was developed, as they said that these banks were developed to help to help bring modernization and prosperity to these countries, to bring them, but also what was also to Americanize the Caribbean and many of these places. So by the time this happened in the 1980s and so on, and of course what was happening, you have the Cold War happening, and then you have PNP and JLP. You have even within countries, Grenada, Jamaica, you have infighting socialism versus Marxism, and that was part of that was as a result of the external supporting the local, the countries of Europe and America supporting some of the locals as a way to penetrate American ideology, supporting factions, and many of them studied overseas, and so you have this local infighting that developed in Caribbean, which is still affecting Caribbean today. The destabilization of the Caribbean is multifaceted when you study it. It's economic in the sense that we have a dependent capitalist country now, because I tweeted recently if you read, let me see if I could find that tweet. I could find my tweet. Very important that I find that. If I can find that tweet, this is very important. And we're gonna. I want you to follow. I want you guys to follow the lecture today. Today we have a lot to get into, but I want to bring up something, and I'm gonna ask you a question in a few seconds. What's that showing here? I asked in a tweet earlier. No, actually, let me bring up that tweet. See if I can find. Are you guys seeing my screen? And I'm gonna bring it up. There we go.
Yes, sir.
Okay, JP Morgan Chase, the chief executive of JP Morgan, and I retweeted this. The chief executive, Jamie Dimon, said that, Jamie Dimon said that a default on U.S. debt, a prospect the country faces, unless its debt ceiling is raised by the government, would be potentially catastrophic in an exclusive interview. Why am I talking about debt and default? I'm not talking about US, but here is a JP Morgan Chase talking about debt. When a country defaults on its debt, it is potentially catastrophic. It is potentially catastrophic. Debt has defined the Caribbean. Now, the US is a big country. The US is a big country. the post-industrial country. Okay, and if they suffer, if Mr. Diamond is saying that if the U.S. should default on its debt, it's gonna have catastrophic effect. Imagine what's going on with these countries of the Caribbean. So debt plays a very important part. But these countries went to the IMF and so on and so forth, asking for money. And what happened? They got these loans at high interest rates. And the interest rates was deliberate. They know they can't pay this back. They will forever. These countries, they thought they got independence, but and that's the thing. And that's what we got. When we get into Haiti, I want you guys to follow me. Follow the strategy. Follow the strategy, guys. Haiti got independence. Haiti was the first country to ever get, was the first black country. First black people to be freed from slavery. First. Independent black nation. A sense of pride. But that wasn't supposed to happen. The Haitian Revolution wasn't supposed to happen. It was an example that many people, that many Europeans and the elites did not want many people, many other black nations and black people to get a sense of. And they said the Haitian Revolution even led to the French Revolution, or whatever the case is. But we're not talking about that today, but we're talking about strategy here. And this, I want you guys to follow me in this class. This is very important. Very important. Follow the class. Very important. And strategy. Haiti got independence. And we're going to play I hope like we can play the interview today. And when they got independence after the Haitian Revolution, they were freed. They didn't get independent. They took their independence. They took it. They didn't get it. They took it in 1804. But can I tell you right after that? Because of that, they said that the French did whatever deal they made, the French ordered them to pay billions of dollars for taking French land, which is ridiculous. It's their land, the peoples of Haiti's land, but they say that it's the French, and for years, and Haiti did not pay back that debt until in 2000, and that's one of the reasons that has had catastrophic effects on Haiti. You see the strategy? As soon as they get independence and they were free from European domination, and these black people were freed, guess all of a sudden they're in debt and trying to pay back this debt to France. That affected them. This debt affected them significantly. That's the strategy. Build debt. And they use interest rates. The idea of interest rate is the idea of debt. And if you have the ability to manipulate interest rate as a lender, and who are the people that lend people with money? Okay? And if you lend if you are now independent and free, but you still have to go and pay and borrow money or whatever you have to pay, then guess what? You're not really free. You're not really free. And guess the same thing happened when the Caribbean. And that strategy seemed to have gotten traction because fast forward to the 1960s, 1950s, all these Caribbean countries getting independent. And by 1970s, globalization is happening and OPEC is happening and you don't have any money. And then you have to go ask these countries for money. And guess what? You're in debt again. And guess what? That has shaped the Caribbean. Debt. So you create a situation of freedom where you think you are free, but you are not free, because once you put someone in debt, then you are never free. So when you talk about freedom, what are you talking about? Freedom. When you put it in terms of the context of debt and then how it is, and so therefore when you look at what Ramesh F. Ramsaran says, he says this. So you talk about structural adjustment. And if you read the book Neoliberalism, Globalization, Becoming Inequality, Poverty, and Resistance, I talk about structural adjustment. And we're going to get into it in the lecture in a few. The structural adjustment issue. Structural adjustment. Where you reshape the structure of the economy by applying neoliberal policies. The structural adjustment, the issue of structural adjustment in terms and its effect on the Caribbean, and not just the Caribbean, but a lot of post-colonial countries, is not surprisingly one surrounded by intense controversy and emotion, especially if you come from those countries that are affected negatively by structural adjustment. This is because it does not concern simply with economic policies or improving government performance, because that was the idea and that was the thesis. Structural adjustment was supposed to be the sine qua non of development. Structural adjustment or neoliberal policies to globalize it was supposed to be the ideal of development, supposed to bring prosperity, supposed to advance the Caribbean countries and these countries coming into the globalized world and so on, advance them along the stage of development, because according to Mike Davis and so on, their development follows their stages of development. And so if there are stages of development, we're supposed to move from one stage to the next, and that's supposed to happen. But listen to what he says, no, here is the critical thinking here. He's suspicious of it. He says, but brings into question basic philosophy and ideology. Caribbean thought, and may also involve the effective transfer of decision-making from local hands. And not just also to bring capitalist ideology, but may also involve the effective transfer of decision-making from local hands. That decision-making, this is very important, circle that, the transfer of decision-making. Independence meets globalization, which in effect was the transference or the remonopolization of the Caribbean. Again, from colonization to independence, independence to globalization, globalization to now we have the transfer of hands, transfer of local hand, transfer of power, the transfer. So it's as if you are remonopolizing the Caribbean, not through force, because now we have become sophisticated. You're no longer using the strategy of force, but now you're using debt and calling it structural adjustment. Debt and calling it structural adjustment. And that is what he is alluding to here. Debt and calling it structural adjustment. And this was what, and this is Ramesh F. Ramsawan. And it was important for me to begin there today. Very important as we delve into the course Caribbean thought. The next thing is, as we delve into the course, I want to lift up something from the course outline. The course outline, I said that the course surveys the history and philosophy of the Caribbean. And I say to you in Ram Naresh's book, which was written in 1992 and published in New York by Prager Publishers, according to the book, he says, the structural adjustment issue brings into question basic economic philosophy and ideology. And I say to you, when you look at the course outline, I say to you, the course surveys what? What did the course surveys? It surveys history and philosophy of the Caribbean. History and philosophy of the Caribbean. And the ways in which the Caribbean has emerged as a society in the shadow of colonialism and emergence of neoliberal globalization. And the question and the answer to that is, how have we emerged? We have a dependent capitalist country, or in a sense, a modernized form of colonization. A modernized form of colonization. Because if colonization as I defined 2 weeks ago, is a process, a systematic process of control, where it strips away your individuality. It strips away any power of your power, in a sense, your identity. Where you then, I say to you, based on what we are reading so far, of all the thinkers, Dale Johnson and Ramesh Ramsaran, V.S. Naipaul and Homi Bhabha, Fidel Castro, that we're going to visit, in a sense, and critical thinkers like Foucault, and that's helping us, and Gramsci in his prison, that it's helping us to situate our thinking. The issue, how has it emerged? Debt. Debt has shaped the Caribbean. The issue of debt. The issue of debt. Debt burden. Debt has, and when you are in debt, I actually published an article about several weeks ago, and you can find that article in the Neoliberal Journal of the Neoliberal Corporation website. So I wrote an article talking about another article that was published in the BBC, talking about people of the Black and brown people and people from Caribbean diaspora who are living in the UK, who are struggling to navigate life and who are debt burdened, and how they now have what they call it debt mentors. And I discovered that my sister is a debt mentor, and the article was about the work of my sister helping people who are debt burdened. I was shocked. So I rang up my sister. I'm like, you didn't tell me I could have done an article and interview you for my program. I didn't know you were doing it. But they're working to help to alleviate debt. And then I say to you, and I just lift up what Mr. Diamond from JP Morgan Chase in a Reuters story that says that the debt can have catastrophic effect on a country, effects on a country, on the US. US be one of the greatest economic countries, one of the biggest countries, one of the most wealthiest. What can that do to Jamaica, to the Caribbean? In fact, what has that done? When you have the issue of debt dangling over you, but yet still the debt, we were never in debt. Caribbean went into debt because of also, we punched ourselves in the foot in terms of our development, moving from 1950s into the 1960s. From the 1950s to the 1960s was a very important time for the Caribbean. It was an opportunity for the Caribbean, because they came into the 60s, with some amount of riding on nationalism, with some amount of independence, but they allowed themselves to be caught up in debt, which recolonized them in a sense, because it created a level of dependency. And if you always have to have your hand outstretched like that, then of course, that has helped to shape the Caribbean. That has helped to define, and that is what is, and that continues to shape us. Because later on we're going to talk about tourism. Because we rely so heavily on tourism to give us foreign exchange dollars, we are easily coerced by those countries where we get our visitors from. Although I'm an American now, but I'm an American citizen now, but I am still Jamaican, because we live the American experience, the dynamic. We are melting pot. We are all one people. I believe in oneness. We are all one people. I care about the Jamaican situation. I care about the Haitian situation. I care about the the black position. I care about the brown position. I care about people who are discriminated in society. I care about people who are, because of ethnocentrism and privilege, the people, they are treated as less than because of pride that people have and they impose on others. And it creates a difficult experience of living and a difficult experience of life. So yeah, I care about all of that. So I am saying to you that has dogged the Caribbean. We have shot ourselves in the foot, just moving from the 50s to the 60s and then going into the 60s. But are we learning from it? And that is why it is important that I ask the question, what is the Caribbean? But who determines this? And you could say, well, in the past, we were colonized, but no, we have some level of independence. So now it is I. Now it is I. And you always hear the Rastas talk about the I and I. The I and I. It is the I. And people think that that's so selfish. What are they talking about? When you start to study with post-colonial man who has been colonized and his inability to identify the I, he's been emasculated, or the woman can't be a woman or a mother, and so on and so forth. The I and I is important, recognizing the importance of the I, the power of the individual who has been depersonalized, which is the definition of colonization according to Frantz Fanon in Wretched of the Earth. Depersonalized and whose identity have been stripped away. Okay, but this is an important, it's important to know who determines this. And I say to you, is it the I? No, it's not necessarily the I, because it's still being determined for us. Still being determined for us in the sense of, death, and somebody said in the class last week, no, why do we always have to think in terms of social, in terms of economic, in terms of economics? Why do I have to think in terms, and I say to you, the day when they invented currency, the day when the world invented currency, was the day when you start thinking in terms of currency. And probably that was also a strategy, because whoever have most of the currencies have power. It's quite interesting. Now, so that is the introduction to our class. And so we are moving from that today, moving into something else. We want to continue. We said that the course, Caribbean Thought. So we look at history and philosophy of Caribbean and the ways in which the Caribbean has emerged as a society in the shadow of colonialism and the emergence of neoliberal globalization. The Caribbean Thought examines the central ideological current of 20th century political thought in the region and covers broad topics such as colonialism, nationalism, that's what I was trying to find. My book by Eli Kaduri. Eli Kaduri provides a definition of nationalism, which I love, and I don't have it. I don't have it. It's in my book, Neoliberalism. I wanted to bring it directly from her book. It's somewhere around here. I find it, but Eli Kaduri that wrote about nationalism. But as I was saying, so I said it examines the central ideological current of 20th century political thought. I'm going a little bit further than that, but 20th century political thought. That has helped to define Caribbean and covers broad topics such as colonialism, nationalism, Pan-Africanism. The students define Pan-Africanism, socialism, Marxism, feminism, democratic socialism, neoconservatism. Some people would define Edward Seaga as a neoconservatist. Neoliberalism, globalization, deconstructivism. We haven't defined that yet. We have to define deconstruct. But when you hear deconstructivism, you're deconstructing, you're unpacking something. Yes, it involves that. So we talk about deconstructivist history. In other words, you're revisiting history, you're unpacking it. Because if we say that history is a result of human nature and circumstance, yes, and 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 that and that and that and the post-structuralist like Michel Foucault talks about institution and how they are created within society to maintain a particular knowledge of that history steeped in human nature. Of course, there are people like Stephen A. Smith and say, okay, so what? You know what I mean? There is no so what. Because then you begin to start thinking about your reality in the world. And I say the course looks at critical race theory, it looks at strategy. Strategy is important. When you start, strategy is important because I talk about strategy, the strategy of remonopolizing, of redominating, of looking at power. We're talking about maintain position in the world, privilege in the world, status in the world. So there's a strategy behind maintaining positions in the world. If we live in a competitive world, then competition is a strategy. If we live in a human race that is based, if we have racial, and I talk about that in the last, if you listen to the summary, racialized thinking. If you think in terms of race, and by race, I mean not in terms of one race as a human race. If you think in terms of a black race, a white race, and so on and so forth, then this kind of thinking suggests competition between races, which also suggests strategy. So therefore, you have to now study strategy. If your position is based on strategy, which appertains or continues today. And then, of course, the course looks at the foundations of knowledge. The foundations of knowledge. The foundations of knowledge, therefore, would be part of that strategy. And the hegemony of faith. It looks at economic. Notice I say the hegemony of faith, and faith was never a dominant feature when you study the development of society. Faith was never a dominant concept or tradition when you start to study from Mesopotamia all the way up, or Samaria into Greek, up with the Iliad, so on and so forth, Persia, Egypt, whatever. I mean, well, until you get to a certain period, then you start fine. But there was no hegemony of faith in terms of. But even when you start to move into the Greco-Roman world, the development of Rome and Caesar start to dominate it, the Roman Empire, and then the church and Ignatius and others thought, oh, let us develop some credibility. Credibility is important, reputation. So the church developed Roman identity as strategy to develop or to extend their dominance, especially as people compete for dominance over other religious ideologies. So, but also the church, and as the church grew, the politicians of the day, because there was no Caesar as in Caesar being a god, but then because within those days, the first 200-300 years of Christianity, 400 years of the Caesars and so on, we find that movement towards this Caesar being seen as some emperor, some god. And then, of course, there was strong political fight. The politics of Rome was much like the politics of what happened between European countries that was speed towards the kind of colonization we're talking about with the Pope and so on. But before that, before we get to the 1400s and 1300s and so on and so on, you've got Rome was 500 AD, 300 AD, 200 AD. And if you study the Roman Empire, it was quite interesting. There was this competition, but then there was there was the politics of Rome, where figures across Roman cities are fighting for dominance until, of course, you have the rise of the Caesar. And this one Caesar, which I can Augustus, thought to, oh wow, the Christianity is one group that let me develop. If I side with the Christian, then it might give me more power. So you find that also there's a quid pro quo, so to speak, a marriage between the two, where both saw that they could develop credibility and prominence and reputation. So when we talk about the hegemony of faith, we talk about within the Western civilization, because it is this hegemonic faith that helps to provide a justification for slavery. And of course, we're going to talk about economic inequality and poverty. Now, among the thinkers and works that will be considered throughout the course are Marcus Garvey. Now, Marcus Garvey is Jamaican. George Padmore from Trinidad. And George Padmore he was a journalist, George Padmore. I think in the 1920s, and he was a socialist, was a Marxist. Most of these guys are Marxists or socialists. And so we talk about socialism, Marxism. It's very important we talk about that. We understand. I mean, okay, talk about socialism, Marxism. Who are the people who are behind these thinkers? So when you hear me talk about Karl Marx and so on and so forth, Trotsky, Frantz Fanon and those people, comes out of all those thinkers help to shape Caribbean thinkers. C.L.R. James, same thing, socialist. But he's also Trinidadian. And I'm going to talk about C.L.R. James in the course today. Very important, because as we start to think about Haiti and what's going on in Haiti. V.S. Naipaul, Foucault, I referenced Foucault, post-structuralist, Frantz Fanon. We have been talking about Frantz Fanon, Walter Rodney, Fidel Castro, Michael Manley, all those people, Edward Seaga. And Edward Seaga is important. Now, the students in Group 2 wrote a paper, which we're going to get to it. But before we get into it, we're going to take a quick break. But before we get to the quick break, there is a question that there is a poll in LinkedIn and on Twitter. There is one on my Twitter page going on right now. And where is it? There's a Twitter. Where is that Twitter page? No. Let's come out of that. Okay. All right, guys. And you guys can have this discussion. We're going to take a 10 minutes break. You guys can have this discussion among yourselves. Group 2, get ready to get the paper that you guys did. I want to see that paper that you did. Get it ready. I want to see that paper that you guys did. We're going to discuss it real quickly. We're going to get into Group 2's paper just briefly. And then after we get into it, we're going to move into the lecture some more. But I want to get to Group 2, get your paper together. I want you to share I want you to share from your paper. Then after you share from your paper, I am going to play a video about C.L.R. James. Powerful. And then after that, I will wrap up with the lecture that I was supposed to give this week, which answers the question, why is it important for us to understand who we are? Why must we revisit the past? We said who we are and who determines this. But then the question is, we spend so much time on this. Why is it important for us to understand that? And the students answered that question. They didn't say that as much. But it was a great, powerful. I love it. Before we take the break, let us quickly have a word of prayer for the people in Haiti. Let us pray. Lord God, we come before you and we thank you. We praise you. You are that which nothing greater can be conceived or imagined. It is in you that we live and move and have our being. We are limited, but you are not. It is we who are trying to make sense of you. May you clear our minds. May we not privilege our ideas and our thoughts. May we be open to criticism, but may we be constructive in our criticism. But Lord God, help us to be able to effect and to provide apology that clearly represents who we are as we defend the individual, the empowered self. and those people who are fighting for identity, who are fighting for self-governance, like those in Haiti, we pray for them. Like those in Ukraine, we pray for them. Like people who are struggling under debt as a strategy, may you give them power and insight. We pray for Jamaica. Develop Jamaica. Give the leaders insight and help them. Lord, I remember I was watching Life and Death, and one of the respondents in Life and Death says Jamaican leaders were weak, need, and lack vision. And the word of God, and your word says one of the great writers and prophets of the scriptures who you have inspired said in writing of an experience that he have come to take hold of. Because of a lack of knowledge, the people perish. Because of a lack of knowledge, the people perish. And Lord God, that is in scripture. And we see in scripture and we see everywhere where people have used that to prevent people from accessing information and accessing knowledge so as to keep the people down. But may you open up our mind, open up our understanding, but help us never to privilege our truth, but help us never to feel as though what we have is less than any other, but help us to be open. There are those of us, Lord God, who might be struggling throughout this, to make it throughout our studies, might be struggling to manage and to balance our lives. Give us wisdom to navigate this life. Help us to enjoy the, Lord God. Life is what people make it, and life is not easy, Lord God. Life is not easy. Life is not easy, but Lord God, help us never to forget that you are always there. You are always there to help us. May you help us even now. Give us wisdom to navigate this life. Give us wisdom, whatever issues any student in the class is struggling with even now. Give them insight, give them support, oh God. Strengthen them, bring healing to their families and to their loved ones. Strengthen their resolve. Help them to fill them with purpose, a sense of purpose. Help them to be bold and help them to be driven and committed to the goals, Lord God, that you have provided. They have skills. They have skills. They have been blessed with many skills, Lord God. Help them to develop and to utilize the skills that you have given them. We tell you thanks and help us to benefit from this class. Help us to have an amazing time in this class. Let our wisdom open up our understanding. Bring people to the Lord God. There's so many goals we have for this class. Let our writing develop. And we're going to publish the writing. Let people see the writing and say, what is this school? All this bit from this amazing scholars. What's going on with JTS? Let the students from this class open up their minds, give them content, give them wisdom. Let them write things that they have never written before. Let them do things that they have never done before in the name of Jesus. Open up their pockets and their bank accounts. Bless them financially and emotionally, intellectually, in the name of Jesus. Help them to rely on you, Lord God. Whatever needs they have, let them know that they can ask of it. Help them not to be selfish as they develop wisdom and knowledge. Help them not to get puffed up, but help them to be humble. Help them to be humble, knowing that the wisdom and the things and the blessing that you give for them is not for them, but they are stewards who are supposed to empower and to inspire and to give back. So bless them, and as you bless them, let them bless others. And bless us to bless others. Bless us to bless others. Pour into us to pour into others. We're not praying to be contented. We're praying to be wealthy so that we can pour into our country and empower our people who have been held down through bureaucracy and through lie. We tell you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, guys. We're gonna take a 5-minute break. And what we're gonna do now, there is a Twitter poll or a LinkedIn poll. You can go on Twitter or LinkedIn. I don't know if you can find it. My LinkedIn, go to the Neoliberal Co. The poll says, or you can discuss it among yourself. Should CARICOM send troops into Haiti on behalf of the US and Canada? Again, should CARICOM send troops into Haiti on behalf of the US and Canada? Now there is a link to. I probably should have posted a link to the in the group, a link to the poll. I think I can do that, right? Oh yes, I can. Copy link and then go to chat, back, and then Control V, enter. All right. Okay. That's the link. And then I actually did an article. Can I find the article? Is this the article? That's not what, okay. You can find the article. I actually did an article. I'll find the article in a second. I was trying to find the an article. It's called the We're gonna take a quick 5 to 10 minutes break. In the meantime, you guys can participate in the poll. I sent it to you guys. If you go to the neoliberal.com, Control C, there is an article that I wrote. It said also it's going to be published. It may be published in the Gleaner. I submitted it to the Gleaner, along with several other articles to be published. But it's published in the neoliberal journals, and it's called the Neoliberal Groundbreaking Interview with Brian Concanen on Haitian Justice. It's breaking news. It's breaking right now. It's a breaking news story that we obtained at the Neoliberal Corporation. With evidence, with an evidence of what's going on with Haiti and the Haitian people. And because we study Caribbean thought, we're going to situate our ideas. We're going to situate it. We're going to provide context and background. We're going to provide evidence and what's going. We're going to look to what's going on in Haiti, in the Caribbean. Haiti, usually I'm not as involved in pointing these things, but because we're studying Caribbean, I wanted to leave you guys to be, we are from. Sorry, you guys are from Jamaica. We are from Jamaica. We probably understand what's going on in Jamaica, but what about what's going on in Haiti? What's going on in Trinidad, Barbados, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Guyana? What's going on there? So you guys can if you guys probably could, and if you guys want some background information before you answer the poll, then you guys can do that, and that would be great. And maybe you guys can have a discussion and chat amongst yourself as you think. I think there's an article in the Gleaner as well, the Gleaner, about the Haitian situation, and there are many Jamaicans who are opposed. What are your feelings as young Jamaicans at the Jamaica Theological Seminary in terms of what's going on with Haiti and the fact that the US and Canada is pressuring Jamaica and the CARICOM to send troops into Haiti, and what's going on the ground and so on and so forth? How do you feel in relation to what we're talking about in terms of Caribbean thought? We're going to probably have a brief discussion about that. There is an article and there are videos and a podcast available, but I don't know where. I've been uploading it since yesterday, but it's taken a long time because we made it into a big production. So that's supposed to be coming up. Again, Brian Concanen will be at the class. He's the executive director for the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, a human rights advocacy human rights group that works with the United Nations, and that's based here in the US. Of course, Mr. Concanen himself is an attorney, human rights attorney. And so I interviewed him, but he's going to come back to the class. We're going to have him probably give us some more updates about his work and what's going on in Haiti. And you guys will get a chance to question him. But if I get a chance, if we have time and we can delve into the article I did earlier today, I will delve into it a little bit. And I will listen to some of your opinions real quickly. Because we don't have much time, we're going off time. I don't want to go into this too much. Right after that, we're going to go into the students' presentation. In fact, I won't go into the Haiti thing yet. Do the poll, but I won't go into the Haiti thing yet. I'm going to go into the presentation of Group 2. I'm going to have Group 2 share briefly, and I'm going to ask Group 2 a question of tell me the question I asked you in the email. And then we're going to discuss that question just for like 5-10 minutes. Then we go into the presentation from the Haiti situation, what's going on in Haiti, and my interview with Brian. And then we conclude with the lecture. All right, that's what we're going to do. That's good, that's perfect. So we're going to take a 5 minutes. We're going to come back at 6:35. I want you to spend some time. Maybe some of you, the group might be looking over the group presentation. I want to give you some time to do that. And also, sent it where, sir? Sent what? What's that? You mean the group? No, I asked the group 2. Patrice had sent me the group paper. Oh, the poll, I texted it to you guys in the group. You see it right here? You didn't get that? You guys didn't get the really? That's weird. Let me do it again. Copy link to tweet. It's a link. It's probably going to take you guys straight to Twitter. If you guys don't have Twitter, you may not be able to participate. So maybe what I should do then is, tell you what, maybe I should create one. Maybe I should create one right here then. So let us get out.
Sir, the link isn't coming at all. There's no message from you.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Share screen can be seen. Advanced sharing options. Advanced sharing options. So when I send you stuff, you guys don't see anything? Huh?
Where are you sending it, sir?
Depends. When was the last time you sent something, sir?
Oh,
is it in the WhatsApp group?
No, in the chat.
In the
chat.
Nothing is there from you. Nothing.
All right, I'm gonna send it to your email. Okay, I'm gonna send it to your email. Okay. Oh, that let's copy link to tweet. Let's do this. Let's minimize. Let's stop share. And now we are back and everybody is here. Stop this. Okay. You cannot minimize when you have a forward card. Okay. All right. Let's do this. And then let's go to my email right here. Put this aside. Why can't I do this? Oh. Okay, good. So I'm going to send it. Okay, is this the email to the student? No. No, not that one. Million things open. Here we go. All right, I'm going to send it to Chantel, and probably Chantel could send it to the group. Patrice, sure you can, sir. Go ahead. All right, nice. Model of development. Okay, I just saw that. Chantel did that. Patrice, where's Chantel? Okay. Chantel, I'm sending you a link. I'm sending you guys, some of you might get it. That's the link. And I just send it. Then I'm going to send one more thing to you guys that I had just sent. Copy. So you guys haven't been getting anything I sent all this time. I've been sending you guys stuff. It's not the first time. I've been sending you guys a lot of links when we are in class. A lot of links. And it seemed as if you guys weren't getting anything. Oh my gosh. There we go. Wait. There we go. Minimize this. All right, did you guys get, I sent an email. I sent a link to the Twitter question. And probably you guys can discuss it among yourselves. Group 2. I think I found the two. Group two, you can, okay, I think group two, where is group two here? Group two. Here we go. Group two. Okay, great. I think I can share I'm going to share my screen again. Oops. I'm going to share my screen again. Let's share screen. Share. All right, I'm sharing my screen. Now I'm gonna bring back up the email. This is the email. Oops. Oh. Chantel, here we go. This is an exceptional paper. It requires further exploration. Why is it but okay, great. So I found it. So that is the email I sent to that's the email I sent to let me bring back up the screen here. This is the quite exceptional, quite powerful, man. Quite powerful, quite powerful. This is an exceptional paper. It requires further exploration. Why is it necessary to define Caribbean thought by revisiting the past? Why? The paper contends for and promote a dynamic Caribbean. The paper that Group 2 wrote, the paper, it contends for and promotes a dynamic Caribbean that is mixed with other identities. Yet, it states that some gets lost in the overlapping because it talks about European, it talks about European, African, and American identity. European, African, and American identity. Quite interesting. And the interplay between, but there's also indentured servitude that also, especially some other Caribbean islands, after slavery, you have indentured servitude. We have a lot of people from India and China coming in that create, even for some Caribbean islands, further mix up. But I asked the question to Group 2, the paper contends for, and no, sorry, I say the paper contends for and promote a dynamic Caribbean that is mixed with other identities. So we can't just, so as much as we come from, we have the same experience of struggle. There's some Caribbean experience don't start from slavery. Some start from indentured servitude. And then you start looking at the descendants and people in the diaspora, first generation American, second generation American. In other words, the descendants of people in the Caribbean who were formerly colonized, who are now living in other parts of the world, such as the global north, and and how their identities in the global north are mixed with the issue of immigration, and how immigration also helps to define, especially immigration, which is a political issue, which stems in large part from an socio-economic problem or challenge. But there is also the issue of overlapping. It states that the article states, or the paper says that this identity gets lost. There's an overlapping. And if we're thinking in terms of identity, what about maroonage and that experience of Caribbean? Which people might thought, oh, that's probably small, a small microcosm of Jamaica. And of course, the American influence, and of course, the 21st century now with the pop culture and the rap culture and BET Entertainment. What does this mean, though? Why is, but furthermore, why do we have, what does this mean? And lastly, what have you learned about Caribbean identity? What have you learned about Caribbean identity and Caribbean thinking from this exercise? Which I just answered some of it. Oh my God, I should not have. Oops. What have you learned? What have you learned about Caribbean identity and Caribbean thinking from this exercise? From the paper that you guys did, and probably by extension, what we have done so far in the course, which I really don't want to spend the rest of the entire class, because the last time I asked you guys questions, it turned up into a whole class, and I have to finish with a lecture and a presentation. So we're gonna take a break until 7:45, and at 7:45 when we come back, or 7:45 when we come back, we're gonna spend 15 minutes to just quickly summarize your paper, just quickly lift up some points, the beginning of it and the conclusion, and probably one section of it that talks about the thinkers like socialism, C.L.R. James, and so on. Because the reason why I'm gonna play a video of C.L.R. James today is because you guys mentioned C.L.R. James. And since this course looks at diverse thinking in the Caribbean, well, and you guys introduced it in your paper, well, might as well introduce C.L.R. James. And since talking about C.L.R. James also talks about a very important history in defining Caribbean today, which is the period of the 1950s to the 60s, and even this guy, they went further, starting from the 1930s, actually, the 1930s and into the 40s. Some people start from that time. And while this guy, he even starts, this guy from Trinidad, where did he start? He started from the 1980s. The 1980s, that's when you start, the 1980s now, that's when you start to talk about gang warfare and tribal politics in Jamaica. Oh my God. But they're talking about Trinidad right here. Okay. And then Walter Rodney was an important figure. They talk about Bob Marley now, and the movie Who Shot the Sheriff. That's not real. Not unless he didn't write a book per se, but Bob Marley is a very important consciousness, very important figure in Caribbean development. When you talk about, I don't think you might have mentioned Bob Marley, Jimmy Cliff, Louise Bennett, Rex Nettleford, Dr. Trevor Monroe, Mutabaruka. And of course, there are some of you in your own personal endeavors. You might like people in evangelical faith in Jamaica, or the evangelical movement, Pentecostal movement in Jamaica. Like talk about the kind of Pentecostalism that we have in Jamaica, or the apostolic faith, because a lot of, I would think about brain drain or immigration or diaspora, or, talk about political tension between the 1980s and, the mass exodus of people in the 1980s from the Caribbean because of what was going on in Jamaica. A lot of people left and came to the Caribbean. It actually started from before that. We have several different waves of people leaving Jamaica to go to Europe or the US. But they brought with them the consciousness too. But then talking about people leaving brings about another challenge. People who can escape and people who can't escape. Okay, the issue of escape. Okay, this is like drinking soup. I love it. This is deep. I tell you, this is great. We'll be right back. We'll be right back. We're taking a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 7:50. And we are back. Welcome back. We will continue with the lecture. By the way, I noticed that we only have about 17 or 18 students in the class. Does anybody know what happened to what is happening with the other students who are not here? I guess I need to reach out to them. I need to find out what. Yeah, they are. We're supposed to have about 24 or something like that students in the class, but I only keep seeing 18. It's very important that anyone that's not here, please let them know that I need everybody to be here in the class. I know they have access to the lectures, so it makes it easy. But I also need to know the students and who are here. I guess again. It's very important. Now we're going to get back to the class. We're going to get into group two. Group two, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Let me just exit. I'm going to exit that. Group two, you guys did an exceptional job earlier. Patrice and group two. And I said for group two, the paper, probably I can bring up the paper. And you guys should be able to see this. What is Caribbean thought? It's just the formatting, but outside that we need to work on, but that's for later on. But it says, what is Caribbean thought and who determines it? Where are the people in group two? Are you guys here?
Yes, sir, we're here.
All right, talk with me, students from the other. By the way, share the paper with the other. Please circulate the paper. But tell me about this paper that you wrote. Tell me about this.
Well, good night or good evening.
I need to see the.
So basically,
I need to see you guys. Okay.
okay. You seeing me?
I can see you now. Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
So, all right. So basically, what group two really dive into is really because Caribbean thought is, as we mentioned in our paper, is so dynamic, and the whole issue that surrounds it. So we delve really into the external factors that determines Caribbean thought. We understand the intrinsic factors is important as well. However, we didn't really focus on that. We focus mainly on the external, such as nationalism, Pan-Africanism, Marxism, and all of, and how it has really changed the trajectory of Caribbean people, and how it has, and how much of what we have been through. And something that we have mentioned in the paper is that a lot of who we are right now is based off what we have experienced, or experiences, what we have seen in our culture, what is modeled before us. So this is definitely played an integral role in our development as human beings, as Caribbean individuals, such as even Stuart's all perspective on being and becoming. It is an ongoing process that requires us, in order to become and to adapt to a new reality, we have to become someone else. And a lot of times, based on what we have gone through and all the barriers and all the inequality and all of that would have somehow hindered us from going into that another level or another dimension of who we are. Yes, we are great. Yes, we are that. But how as colonization changes us, our perspective, our mask, our reality. Yes, we hear of Fanon, black skin, white mask. We hear of all of these things, but how often have we embraced our power? We have heard of the word Negro. We know what the word means. It has a negative connotation in some contexts. When we as Black and brown people say the word Negro, we are taking our power back. When we were enslaved, Negro was used as something derogatory, something that is demeaning, something that confines us to limitation. But however, how do we take our power back? So basically, that's just really an overview. I'm just going to ask Nardia to just pop in right now. Everybody, just share a little bit, tidbit from what we explored in our paper. You're here, Nadia?
Good night, everyone. Um, Thank you, Patrice, she has just delved into majority of the paper. In terms of going into our identity and how it is that we identify as a Caribbean people, as my colleague would have said, it is very dynamic because we have taken onto ourselves a lot of what our forefathers would have been led to believe that they were and that they are supposed to be, in terms of understanding how it is that, even in terms of colonialism, how it is that the colonials were operating. And it's as if living within that sphere, after a period of time, they necessarily lost the original sense of who they were. And as time progressed, what happened is that they would have garnered from each and every experience that happened to them. They would have taken a piece from here, a piece from there. And so what we have realized in our studies is that coming to who we are now, we have to go back to dissect the different parts that have made us who we are now, that have come together to form who we are, as if we are a jigsaw puzzle. And in essence, to reach to the core of who we truly are, we have to examine each piece in its uniqueness and to see what is that was taken from the east, the west, the north, and everything that was placed together to form this conjunction, I guess, of who we are. We have to dissect that to figure out who is that we were before we have become who we are now. And so in terms of putting everything together, it means that looking back becomes necessary in order for us to formulate who we are today, and then to continue formulating who we are as we grow, as we develop, as we interact with the world around us, as we interact with the different peoples that we come into contact with on a daily basis, year to year, and how it is that their culture also is expected to impact us. Because even though we would have looked at the different dimensions of what made us who we are today, we still have to understand that going forward, our future generation will also continue to adapt the things from other nations, from other countries, and they will essentially continue to form. So in the introduction, it spoke to the continuing, like a working definition of who we are. So it's not a case where we can arrive at, to say, for example, a box has 4 sides. We'll never reach that point as a Caribbean people, because as we grow, as we evolve, as we learn, and as we take on our experiences, and as we take from those experiences, our identity shifts. But what should remain is a core understanding of who we are as a Caribbean people, in conjunction with who we are becoming as a Caribbean people.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yes.
So I want to share something else. So the second part of it that says, who determines Caribbean thought? It's just a rhetorical question, is that how do we see ourselves determines our Caribbean thoughts? Like, how do we see ourselves? Do we still see ourselves as slaves, as victims? Do we see ourselves through the lens of colonialism, slavery, different class or caste? Do we see ourselves as Stuart Hall's perception on cultural identity best determines our Caribbean thought? In my perspective, Stuart Hall suggests that there are 2 distinct this definition of cultural identity. The first, cultural identity is a type of collective identity that people have shared for centuries. These people share an ancestor and history. He also suggests that cultural identity is consistent, stable, and unchanging identity frame. It allows for the tracking and tracing of early descendants, which aid in reflecting on the experiences, as Nadia mentioned, of the ancestors, and sharing their truths, their identity, true cultural identity, Black population, living in the diaspora need to know about their African about their African history. In addition to that, Stuart Hall, believes that the second definition of cultural identity is superior to the first. It recognizes similarities and differences that contribute to who we are now and who we have become as a result of historical interventions. So a lot of who we are now, it is really determined by what we experience, as mentioned in the first part. Cultural identity is fluid and ever-changing, which means that what our identity now, the next 100 years might be something different based on how ever-changing our culture is. And the past experiences are deeply enrooted. Stuart Hall distinguished 3 distinct presence in the Caribbean that define cultural identity: the Africa, the European, and American. Slavery and colonial rule, according to Stuart Hall, suppress African presence by overlapping and concealing its culture. I think this is a question that you ask, and it has a lot to do with it's a mixture of so many different identities, where I think Nadia mentioned it, that it suppressed who we truly are. It's in so many senses, as you can see, skin bleaching. A lot of persons, we are Black and brown people, we don't love ourselves because we are told that this is not beautiful, Black is not beautiful. So because our cultural identity is so mixed, there are so many different perceptions and beliefs and systems and opinions and ideology that have been interjected in our culture. We have been seduced into believing or persuading to believing that this is how we should look. That there's a certain look that we should have, and we should look like a certain kind of people. So I will just stop right there. But I will just stop right there basically and just say that a lot of who we are and a lot of who we will become, it is based on the intrinsic and the extrinsic factors. And in many cases, we allow the external to cover or to mask the truth that is internal.
Okay, great.
So I don't know if...
Oh, that was great. Thank you so much. Thank you. You said, you guys, that was really good. You said something. You said that based on your interaction with the article, with Stuart and Levi, you said that reality, as you talk about, he talks about cultural identity, but in your presentation, you referenced the fact that the cultural identity comes from or is a result of current reality. And part of current reality is socioeconomic. The socioeconomic reality of the Caribbean. Our economic affect our social, in a sense. So in a sense, what the reality of who you are, the reality affects cultural. So in a sense, and the second thing you talk about, who we are now, if you talk about the fact that cultural identity is fluid, it's ever-changing. Yet you also say that it's constant. So that part I was like, wait, I wasn't sure. I wanted to ask you. You said the article said that, oh, I prefer this one. I prefer this one. The second part, I prefer it's this one. Culture is identity is ever constant. It's constant. So probably they're talking about an identity that is cultural, it's constant. But all identity comes from culture. A culture, and the culture that's the constant. Identity is not necessarily constant, but culture is cultural. You have cultural identity, an identity that comes from the cultural. you know, but what is constant as against what is ever changing. But anyway, but this is quite interesting. But you said something else. Culture is us and the Caribbean people as part of that black experience, our identity, especially those in the New World, or African descent, people from Afro descent, from the Pan-African experience. They you talk about overlapping of experiences of identity. You talk about African American and European, but then you talk about the suppression of that cultural experience that gives one identity. The suppression of the African, especially those who come from African descent, people who experience slavery. We experience slavery. So you talk about the suppression. We talk about the overlapping of African American and European. But please remember that Frantz Fanon talks about colonization being the depersonalization of the person, slave. And Homi Bhabha interprets that to mean the stripping away of the individual. And if that was true, that is true, that colonization or slavery represented that, the depersonalization of the individual. And we are part of that experience today. We were stripping away of the person, of the person. That's part of who we are. So depersonalization. So that's quite interesting. So that you ask who we are today is part of that stripping away. And does that continue today, that stripping away? But that was quite powerful. But yeah, the point, actually, I lost my train of thought. I just got back to it. I wanted to make a point, the depersonalization or the stripping away, the way in which the plantation society was arranged. People from different tribes were mixed up. People were deliberately put in different tribes. Language and oral tradition helps to preserve culture. When you study culture now, okay, fine, you talk about culture, you start what helps to preserve culture, and so on. You talk about it's a cultural constant and what helps to preserve that, language. But then we were cut off from language. We don't speak that African part of us that was cut off, but there's still this African rhythm, the accent. The accent is not European. We still speak with a kind of an accent, I guess, you know what I mean? But we don't sound African in a sense. But sorry, let me say that again.
Sorry, I'm having trouble connecting to the internet. It looks like an issue with the router and Echo device, so try restarting them. Unplug both of them, then plug the router back in. Wait 30 seconds. Once the router is back on and connected to the internet, plug in the Echo device.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't need you, actually. I wanted you to stay on. But the point, so I was talking about the plantation society and talking about culture and oral tradition and how it's important. Language helps to preserve tradition and culture and so on, but the African way, because people are aware of that, they were deliberately divorced from that cultural connection. They talk about what cultural connection was preserved, but then when you study our music and our dance, they said, oh, there's a lot of some African retention, some amount of African stuff is still there. So, so although it was cut off and so on, but it was still there. So then you start to study African resistance. You start to study African resistance. They tried to divorce African from African, but some amount of that is still there. But that's quite interesting. So that was powerful. And of course, you talk about this suppression of this African, and then you move into the talking about look and acceptance of self. And even within our the issue of colorism, when you start to start looking at colorism, and not only in Jamaica, but in many African nations. So in African American communities and in Caribbean communities that was colonized, and so you find that the issue of color and bleaching of the skin and brown, talk about this bleaching, trying to be brown, trying to look brown. You know, brown is acceptable, the browning, even in the song and the music, the promotion of the browning, you know. And when they talk about blackness, somebody alluded to that in a paper that they submitted to me. I don't know who it was. Somebody wrote a paper and it was well written. Showed a personal experience talking about how he or she was treated as a child growing up in his or her home in Jamaica, and how he or she was made to feel. You know, and you know, even this acceptance, we even was encultured to not accept part of ourselves. If you talk about the overlapping of identities and cultures and so on, but there is always this suppression of the Africanness, the African part of that culture, the African part of that experience. So that you find that people like Louise Bennett, in her genius, recapture that old tradition using the patois. Patois as a way of something that is uniquely Caribbean, uniquely Jamaican, what Jamaicans speak. So, you know, we speak, our official language is English, but we speak patois. Patois is seen as a dialect, not as a language. And in some parts, you know, you find out why is there dialect and then you have language? You know, dialect and language. Language is official. Language is acceptable by the standards as language. The official traditional colonial languages, those are the languages. Okay, that's the language. That's the language. But anything else outside of European standard, that's dialect. So even in terms of how we view language, there are standards, there are privileges, there are positions, you know? And so you use, you know, most Jamaican use, and then even in terms of how we determine class in Jamaica, the more grasp you have, I mean, your grasp of the English language determine how people view you, how people see you, how people accept you, even within Caribbean people, you know, if you speak the colonial language well, you're treated with respect, you're given certain respect, you're placed in certain levels in society. But if you speak too African, or if it's close to the African and close to the dialect, because you know we have to determine that dialects aren't standard and you can't write in the dialect. You can't even write dialect, but of course Jamaica, we are all tradition, we are verbose, you know what I mean? But of course we have developed writing now, you know, you can write patois now, but it's not accepted. You can't use it in academia. You can't use the dialect in academia because it doesn't subscribe to tradition. And what is tradition? To the culture of the colonial rule. And then, of course, people that comes from a tradition that is comfortable with a tradition of dialect will never be accepted because you're not accepted because you are more exposed, especially you're from a culture that exposes you more to the dialect. Whether or not people understand it, because, you know, to me, let me tell you, I wrote something sometime on social media. Somebody sent a response and said, you can't even write properly. The titles are supposed to be in caps lock, the first letters of each. And I responded and said, hey, did you understand what I had written? He said, yeah, I did. Oh, fine. Oh, sure. And then I said, okay, great. Communication happened. Because you know what communication is to make popular? What was the monopoly? You understood exactly what I was saying, even though all the words weren't in caps lock, even though I didn't subscribe to the rule. You know, you're trying to dilute yet my reputation, my worth, the efficacy and the value of who I am as an individual. Okay? Based on standards that's coached in a particular system that promotes an exposure to standards, okay? And demotes an exposure and a comfortability to another experience that's not accepted as standard in order to maintain privilege in society. power. That's a lot that I've just said. That is true. So yes, I've evolved. I have the post-colonial thinker. I've evolved. And I don't care what you people think about that in the 21st century. Well, sometimes that I used to be very nitpicky about what you write. Because it's important for you to try as best to ensure that, because we write. They say when you're in Rome, do as the Romans do. That's what they say. But to me, that's a strategy to maintain privilege in society. When you're in Rome, do as the Romans. But then you live in a world that has been taken over by the external. Okay, so that even in Ukraine today, Ukraine is being chastised by Mother Russia, even though Ukraine have their independence. No, because guess what? It's still Mother Russia. It's still their world. Okay, you still have to subscribe to Russian law and to Russian rule. Even when you get your independence, the Queen must still be the head of state. Anyway, and that's against the point. But this is quite interesting. So when you think about in terms of our acceptance and the chaos in our own society, because all of this it continues standards and privilege even within our own society, a society that came about as a result of the violence of privilege and power and domination, colonization. We still have that kind of dominance and this privilege that's consistent with the suppression of the Africanness. If what you say, there's an overlapping of culture and identities and so on, and there's this suppression, it is evident in the language and even how we as Caribbean people think and how we promote language based on how you speak and what you say. Okay? But that I embrace people like Louise Bennett. Okay? And Oliver Samuels. Yes? I embrace them because that they were these provocateurs. Yes? Iconoclasts in a sense. Image breakers in the Caribbean, in Jamaica. And the others, I feel the Caribbean, like V.S. Naipaul, and the images that he depicts in his books weren't the stars, weren't the polished figures, the polished characters, the heroes that you hear about every day. There were people on the back pages that you don't hear about. And that's what made his writing and his contribution to literature so powerful in terms of how he wrote what he wrote. Who is the hero of the day? It's those who were the colonized man, is the hero of the day. So this is powerful. Now I'm sharing my screen. You guys define Pan-Africanism, and I'm so happy that I want you guys to share this paper because in it you define a lot of stuff that we contend with for this class. Pan-Africanism is the belief that people of African descent share common goals and should collaborate to achieve them. Again, Pan-Africanism is the belief that people of African descent share common goals and should collaborate to achieve them. Pan-Africanism has historically taken the form of a political or cultural movement. Okay? Talk about nationalism and you find that Pan-Africanism, and talk about Fidel Castro, talk about a Latin Africa. Even Fidel Castro and how he, and this nationalist identity driven by democratic socialism and so on and so forth. There's this Latin Africa, this Pan-African movement. And of course, some people, for example, Fidel Castro and Cubans were promoting the African side of their Latin Africanism or something, or whatever you call it, or Latin Americanism. We talked about Latin Africa. But of course, people like this in Dominican Republic that have a very bad taste left of Haiti. We talk about Haiti's past. Talk about what Haiti is going through. I just thought about it. Haiti, maybe what the sin of Haiti. Talk about the sin of Haiti. Haiti tried to colonize. After Haiti got their independence, they tried to colonize Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. They tried to colonize it. Haiti. Yes. And so you wonder, after they got their independence, and they fight to God. Then they try to go and colonize the country. I mean, and I'm saying maybe that's the sin of Haiti. Maybe that's karma. You know, talking about anyway. So let's, but this is, they say we are academics. We're not going to talk about karma, okay, in this class. In that sense, we will talk about what maybe the sin. We'll talk about it in a theological sense, the sin of Haiti. But anyway, but let's move on from that. Let's move on from that. But Pan-Africanism manifests itself in a variety of ways. In their most narrow political manifestation, Pan-Africanism envisioned a unified African nation, underline that, unified African nation where all African diaspora can live. The term African diaspora refers to the long-term historical process of people of African descent being dispersed from their ancestral homelands to other parts of the world. Pan-Africanism, in a broader sense, is the belief that people of African descent share much that should be recognized and even celebrated. And they took part of that from Tay. I'm not sure what part they took or whether or not they were interacting. I guess they interacted with the definition. And they say that Pan-Africanism is both an ideology and a movement that promotes the unity and solidarity of people of African descent, both within and outside of the continent. Pan-African nationalism as a movement and ideology incorporated Africans and the diaspora's political, historical, cultural, spiritual, and scientific legacies. The Pan-African movement sought to promote ancient African civilizations, moral values, social norms, traditional principles, and customary laws. So people like Marcus Garvey, promoted things, and you look at some of his paraphernalia that he uses and his movement. Pan-Africanism as a system, even the Rastafarian movement, has also fought against slavery, racism, colonialism, imperialism. In other words, Pan-African nationalism has carried Pan-African nationalism, which is the political aspect of Pan-Africanism, because of course, you talk about the cultural aspect of the paraphernalia and the music and the dance and the art, but when you talk about Pan-African nationalism, it's talking about the socio-political part of it, has carried the mission of redressing the historical injustice of slavery, colonialism. That's talk about Pan-Africanism, talk about reparation, giving back monies. Just so you talk about Israel becoming a nation again, and them the hundreds of thousands of investments poured into it of Israel. Why can't it happen in African nations? Okay, but anyway, Pan-Africanism talks about that, the historical injustices. And so therefore we talk about injustices. How do you repair injustice? Think about giving back. Reparation is one of the ways we think about repairing injustice, not social welfare. Social welfare continue to keep people hooked, keep people into poverty, okay? Quell the masses kind of a thing, okay? The Caribbean has made significant contributions to Pan-Africanism. So if you talk about Caribbean thought, delve into issues of Pan-Africanism. Then therefore Pan-Africanism also extends to African-Americanism, African-American history. Also the post-colonial people in the UK and all over the world. And activism. Pan-Africanists have fought long and hard for the dignity and humanity of African descendants of the Caribbean, Africans on the continent, and Africans everywhere. Caribbean Pan-Africanists have always been keenly interested in African development. They've always sought to provide solidarity, underline that word, and concrete assistance in the fight against slavery, colonialism, neo-colonialism, new form of colonization and of control, like structural adjustment we talked about just now. Transfer, we said that earlier. And may also involve, structural adjustment may also involve the effective transfer of decision making, the ability to make decisions from the local, so, there's not much power in the local. Very important, from the local, okay? Neo-colonialism, so different, which might be consistent with what we talk about, neoliberalism or neocapitalism, racial apartheid that happened in Africa. Some of the accomplishments of Pan-Africanism include it played a significant role in the abolition of slavery in the Caribbean, in the United States and Europe. One of the things that you should do in this paper is you could put a footnote of journals, articles, writing, literature that people can go to that speaks to these accomplishments in terms of, okay, fine, they played a role in the abolition of slavery in the Caribbean. Where did this happen? What because I thought Pan-Africanism started after slavery. Was there Pan-Africanism during slavery when it happened? And of course, yes, there was. And there are actually, I have several books, right? There are some books from the archive, books written during the time from the 1800s, from the 1700s, speaking to the whole issue. Where is that book? The African History or African Journal of History. I'm going to bring it up. When we get a break, I'm going to get that book for you that looks at artifacts and journals and letters that shows that actually communication happening between, but of course, we thought language posed a problem, but we have to delve through that, provide literature for that. I'll probably explore that. Probably maybe that's what the group should do then. Develop this into a deeper paper that speaks to some more stuff. United States, Europe. The Pan-African movement clearly contributed significantly to the emancipation of African slaves in various parts of the world. C.L.R. James, their work. Padmore, Marcus Garvey also. Say, for example, what the first prime minister in Ghana, Nkwamu, I don't speak Ghana, I can't pronounce his name. But the first prime minister, independent prime minister of Ghana in 1970, was influenced by, I think it was Padmore. It was Padmore that influenced the prime minister. And I'll probably talk about that in a few. I'll talk about it. I can find the information for you. Padmore. So you have Jamaican Caribbean people who influence African leaders as well. Marcus Garvey and Padmore, literarians, very influential thinkers, and Frantz Fanon. It aided in the development of a sense of oneness and brotherhood among people of African descent, both on and off the continent. It brought together pro-Pan-African intellectuals to unearth our pre-colonial shared values and to develop an African political economic ideology. It made significant contributions to the liberation of many American states, so on and so forth. One of them. Now I have to get. I like what. I don't know if they got this from whatever they were reading or whatever. I love this. One of the Pan-African. You always want to get to the critiques. One of Pan-African's major flaws is the continent's failure to achieve economic freedom. As a result, Africans continue to face starvation, extreme poverty, foreign aid, dependency, budget deficits, famine, and other natural disasters. The second disadvantage of Pan-Africanism is the failure of African states to achieve political and economic integration. Last but not least, Pan-Africanism suffers from a lack of well-articulated and rationally designed public strategies and policies. I completely agree. I don't know where you guys got that from, but completely agree. It's not targeted. Listen, if your position is a result of a system, is a strategy that you are caught within a bureaucratic system that still exists today in various de facto forms all over the world, then you have to be very strategic and study the ways and the system that has created your position, and then come up with a system, yes, that mitigates, that challenges, that opposes that system. Okay? And I'm talking about not just strategy, not just violence in terms of our language and maybe using but I'm talking strategy. Strategy. And when you study social movements, and when you start to study doing class study, there's a book by Piven and Cohen that talks about social movements, why social movements fail and so on, and let the people decide. Neighborhood organizing in America that looks at various social movements and why social movements fail, and they move because of course, because they always this greed and nepotism that's creeping in again in these movements. They became infected by the very same thing that they're fighting against. Okay, power and privilege and position, and hegemony, and so on and so on. And they're never strategic, and everybody wants to start their own shop, okay, and lead it. Or they make ceremonial agreements with those in power, okay? And they serve as house slaves. But we talk about, you have to, you see how, that's why I say you have to study China. Not study China because you want to adopt communism, but you want to study the strategy that they use in the world to develop. Of course, China is a much bigger country, but they were also, they were a developing country that might be set with poverty and so on. And of course, they have a monolithic society, not much as dynamic, but we have to be strategic. And you have to be, that's why you have to study strategy. So as we look at it, we're doing a SWOT analysis. What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities? What are our strengths? And you talk about looking at Pan-Africanism. And it's a Pan-Africanism failed because it has not been able to achieve political and economic, and that is true. Look what happened and I said to you, between the 1950s and the 1960s. It was a great opportunity in the Caribbean, but we wasted the opportunity in the Caribbean because of an inability to come together. And so we all went alone, wants to go at it alone. And then again, if we're supposed to have a Caribbean single market economy, it took years in the making. And it's still a struggle because some people didn't want, Jamaica dollar is sliding. We don't want Jamaica to be part. We don't want to adopt a single market economy and share currency, because then the currency of the economy might fall slightly, because we don't think about the long run, we want to think in the short. We're not strategic in the Caribbean. And that is why I say that's why we have to revisit the past. And they talk about economically, we're still suffering. So 10 years, you fast forward years, you say, yes, we've achieved independence. But no, I said to you, I question that we haven't achieved independence, especially when you put into perspective what Ramsawan has said in terms of transferring power, decision-making, and you're looking at in terms of the bureaucratic phenomenon, looking at it in terms of what's going on in Haiti today, looking at it in terms of the debt, the issue of debt, and the fact that debt is dangling over the Caribbean. And today, because we're still vulnerable, even though many Caribbean countries have paid off their debt, they still are suffering from a lack of investment, a lack of capital. And not only that, a lot of money, they make a lot of money probably in the Caribbean, but most of it is exported. A lot of it goes away, doesn't remain on the island. And so majority of in terms of the economy in Jamaica and the Caribbean, it's very vulnerable. It's heavily dependent on aid. And if you're heavily dependent on aid and foreign exchange is still kind of an aid. In the sense that, first of all, fine, it's not an aid. But we rely on people visiting our country, or the Caribbean rely on people visiting the Caribbean. And if majority of the Caribbean people, the visitors come mainly from post-industrial countries, then there we go, post-industrial and former colonial masters. Then who can issue travel bans and say, do not go to this country. If you go to this country, you're going to make your life a living hell, or whatever the case might be. That affects your ability to earn. So then, therefore, there we go. Caribbean Marxism offered the working class at the time more than just revolutionary theory. It offered a possible way out. Post-political independence of the region saw a change in the way of thinking. So they saw a way out. Remember, a way out. You're talking about all, capital, it was the way out. And, many people and Americans were I would say, why is it that these people, all of these Caribbean countries in the 50s and the 40s, saw a way out? We're looking to big capital, we're looking to capitalism. Capitalism was about a consciousness that speaks to the people. It wasn't promoting profit that is mainly for the few, which was always the experience. Colonization came out of that. They said they were looking for gold. Okay, and from that, they didn't find gold, but they found another use. Oh, sugar. They could mass produce sugar in the Caribbean and enslave and do it for cheap if they enslave a whole set of people. Now they said, okay, now let's create labor, wage. Let's create wage now. Now we don't have to take care of them. We don't have to take care of their needs. Now they have to take care of themselves, and they can buy our products. And they take care of themselves. We have to take care of them. We don't have to provide a place for them to live anymore. We don't have to give them food to eat anymore. So, it's cheaper now to pay them. Because when you do the math, okay, let's do a cost-benefit analysis. Per slave, it's costing us $2. But if we give them their freedom, if we give them their freedom, then guess what? We're no longer paying $2. And okay, now we can hire them and pay them 50 cents. So now it's costing us 50 cents where it's costing us $2. And they need work and they need to survive. Oh, anyways. But let's jump to the bottom. But you guys, great work. And so, anyways, so that was important as I read through. That was really good, very good work. The conclusion: while European colonialism, racism, authority, and power have left a legacy in the Caribbean, even if people want to distance themselves from the history of oppressors, European presence, according to Hall, has now become an unavoidable part of their cultural identity and history. America's presence in the Caribbean, according to Hall, is a person's identity as the ground, place, or territory where all of the world's culture collide. In the Caribbean, diasporic cultural identity is a synthesis of all global presence. So on and so forth. I won't continue to read that. All right, great. So now you have read that. And I'm going to share. Oh, wow. I want to ensure that I'm sharing my audio. Okay, share sound.
And the Saint-Domingue Revolution. I'm D. Elizabeth Glasgow, and I'm your lecturer for this series. C.L.R. James' book, The Black Jacobins, is a powerful and definitive history of one of the most important but under-recognized events in history, the slave revolution that took place in Haiti from 1791 until 1803. The book is important not only as a historical account of the event, but as one of the very first examples of history told from the point of view of the oppressed population, in this case the slaves of the island. James was a politically engaged journalist from Trinidad, and he spent considerable time in the book discussing the truly awful conditions of slavery in Saint-Domingue, as Haiti was then called. He looked at before the revolution and the remarkable leadership qualities of the slave-turned-revolutionary Toussaint Louverture. James' outlook in the book was very much influenced by Marxist philosophy, and this is what set the book apart from other accounts by other scholars of the Haitian Revolution. James wrote, "The revolt is the only successful slave revolt in history, and the odds it had to overcome is evidence of the magnitude of the interests that were involved." Beyond the bottom-up history, that is, history told from the perspective of the marginalized rather than those of the elite status or politically influential members of society, readers of the Black Jacobins will gain a greater understanding of the political dynamics of the late 18th century. Now, this includes not only the events in Saint-Domingue, but the influence of the revolutions that took place in both America and France, and the key role that slavery played in these politics. When you're looking at a book like The Black Jacobin, you will be able to gain a fuller appreciation of the truly barbaric practice and the nature of the economies that were built from that practice of slavery. Now, the book is a radical work, and so it will appeal to readers who lean towards revolutionary politics, but it is also a work that is very engaging to a wider audience. So let's look at the work in the context of how it was written. The book, The Black Jacobins, is an example of what is called history from below. Now, although the term itself denotes works of history told from the perspective of people of low social and economic status, it was only used by historians long after The Black Jacobins was published in 1938. James' book was one of several works that inspired the field of subaltern or post-colonial studies. Here, historians from the branches of social inquiry, which deal with the various legacies of the colonial period, write history from the point of view of the subalterns being those groups that have been excluded from traditional power structures and opportunities, like slaves and peasants. James's approach to history, and indeed the whole of the subaltern school, cannot be understood without appreciating the works of Karl Marx, whose idea of history was shaped by the German philosopher Hegel's notion of the dialectic, a word that denotes the tension created between an idea or concept and the reactions that rise up in opposition to it. This antithesis eventually leads to a kind of synthesis, a fusion of the two ideas. Karl Marx built on this idea of the dialectic to develop his notion of historical materialism, where history is pushed forward by economic forces. The word materialism here should not be confused with its contemporary meaning, which is a focus on material possessions. Rather, Marx believed that the driving force of history was how the means of production, or the tools and resources used to produce goods and services, how those are owned and organized in any society. For example, in a capitalist society, most economic activity is in private hands, and businesses act in a way that promotes the profits and interests of their owners. As Marx wrote in the German Ideology, this mode of production must not be considered simply as being the production of the physical existence of the individuals. Rather, it is a definite form of activity of these individuals, a definite form of expressing their life, a definite mode of life on their part. As individuals express their life, so they are. He went on to write in the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, "Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all dead generals weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living." So in other words, Marx believed that individuals tended to see the world according to their role within the means of production, as business owners, for example, or as wage earners. The interests of those often competing groups is what drives history, according to Marx. Antonio Gramsci extended Marxist theory to the discussion of culture, and in doing so laid the groundwork for subaltern history, or history from below. Put simply, Gramsci developed a theory of cultural hegemony, stating that the dominant social class, for example the bourgeoisie or the business owners, not only had a big influence over the economy, but they had a big influence over a society's culture as well. Gramsci believed that the creation of an alternative or proletarian culture, that is, a culture of the workers promoting revolutionary ideas, that these were necessary for the overthrow of capitalism and the rise of the communist state. So to some extent, this is also the goal of subaltern studies, of which the Black Jacobins plays a very early part. Subaltern studies represent the history of groups excluded from the dominant culture. While James was strongly influenced by a Marxist approach to history, the Black Jacobins is not rooted in any particular academic school or debate. Rather, it emerged from the tense political environment of the late 1930s. C.L.R. James was a keen observer of both political events and cultural developments, and there is some evidence that the author was inspired by his immediate surroundings in London while he was writing The Black Jacobins. In The Black Jacobins, C.L.R. James asks a central question: how did a group of uneducated slaves in what is today Haiti successfully overthrow their colonial masters and defeat the invasions that followed from France, from Britain, and from Spain? As the only successful slave revolt in history, the events in Saint-Domingue warrant attention. As an historian, James' aim is to describe the slave revolt from the point of view of the revolutionaries and their leader, Toussaint Louverture. Throughout James's historical investigations, he is asking another question as well. What is the nature of revolution? And what are the conditions in which the proletariat, or the workers, can overthrow those responsible for their oppression? Although James does not explicitly frame his discussion in these terms, his political viewpoint informs his discussion of history. James's Marxist beliefs also place the book squarely in the heart of the political conflicts of the late 1930s. As he writes, the violent conflicts of our age enable our practiced vision to see into the very bones of previous revolutions more easily than heretofore. He refers to the violent upheavals going on across Europe at the time, the eve of World War II. He notes the revolts held by the fascist leader in Spain when he writes of Franco's heavy artillery, and refers to the mass repression in the Soviet Union when he writes of the rattle of Stalin's firing squads. Such is our age, and this book is of it, with something of the fever and the fret. He writes in The Black Jacobins, the writer has sought not only to analyze, but to demonstrate in their movement the economic forces of the age, their molding of society and politics, of men in the mass and individual men, the powerful reaction of these on their environment at one of those rare moments when society is at boiling point and therefore fluid. As a work of history, The Black Jacobins builds upon previous works on the Revolution in Saint-Domingue and the conditions there more generally, much of it published in French. These works include scholarly histories, first-person accounts, official archives, and travel books. James provides an annotated bibliography of these works in the book, in which he writes, despite the importance and interest of the subject, it was for long difficult to find in English or French a comprehensive treatment of the Saint-Domingue Revolution. Both in insight and objectivity, the Haitian writers are easily the best. James draws on a long list of sources, notably Colonel Henri de Pouillon-Belize, and his history of 1899, Histoire militaire de la Révolution de Saint-Domingue, or A Military History of the Revolution of San Domingo. James writes of this book, this is the official French account. Pouillon misunderstands the whole campaign, both the offensive plan of Leclerc and the defensive plan of Toussaint. There is no limit to the brazenness of these imperialist historians. Despite disagreeing with Pouillon's version of history, James finds the historian to be a careful scholarly writer and is able to build on Pouillon's work. This is a theme in James's work. Though he frequently disagrees with the work of scholars who went before him, he finds that he can use their work in his own. In an important way, James's history of the Haitian Revolution builds on the work of the scholars of another revolt that started barely 2 years earlier, the French Revolution. As he notes in The Black Jacobins, it is impossible to understand the Saint-Domingue Revolution unless it is studied in close relationship with the Revolution in France. Fortunately, the French Historical School of the French Revolution is one of the greatest historical schools of Western civilization. James lists in the book several French historians who inspired his own study of the Haitian Revolution. They exposed the economic foundations of the French Revolution. They wrote about the personalities of the main actors and covered the politics of the period. James credits these influences in the book on the Haitian Revolution. I have sought all through to show the direct influence of the French Revolution on events and leading personalities in Saint-Domingue. It appears from James's biography that the awareness of and interest in this history was sparked when he moved to Europe in the 1930s. In that sense, the intellectual basis of the work is James's attempt to unify his understanding of West Indian culture, that is, the culture of the islands of the Caribbean Sea, and history with the debates over history and politics going on at the time in England and France. So in other words, James was very much influenced by historians of the French Revolution when he wrote The Black Jacobins. This is D. Elizabeth Glasgow. Thanks for watching.
Okay. Okay, great. That was really powerful. Love it. You guys listen to that?
Yes, sir. Tried to follow. Tried.
Well, you guys, okay, I am probably going to send you the link. You guys can watch it again. It's very powerful. It's important because it speaks to the issue of one of the thinkers that we have to contend with when we think about West Indian and Caribbean thinkers. He's very important. His contemporaries were people like George Padmore, and I was just reading about George Padmore earlier. George Padmore, also from Trinidad. But one of the good things about people like George Padmore and C.L.R. James, and then there is also around the 1930s and 1940s, C.L.R. James, 10 years, Jomo Kenyatta, the Gold Coast, Ghana, Kwame, here's the name, Kwame Nkrumah, and South Africa's Peter Abraham. So this is important. So publishing as a strategy for political change. Publishing was a strategy for political change. And talk about what is the nature of revolution? What is the nature of revolution? And we talk about these guys, for them it was writing because they understand, they were thinkers. I mean, knowledge is power. And that's what defines many of these nationalist thinkers, though, is the ability to think. They were philosophers, they were thinkers, deep thinkers, they were scholars, academics who promoted knowledge and deep thinking, strategy. The question that C.L.R. James asked in the book, Jacobins, he asked, how were the Haitians able to beat the Europeans? And that's how are they able to beat them? And that's a question that we have to constantly study. And and by the way, we talked about Marx. And by the way, you heard they talk about Marx was influenced by Hegel, talked about the dialectic, how forces move, the tension between forces. And Marx talked about this historical materialism, how society is organized, and I talked about the effect society and positioned in society. And then Gramsci built on that to talk about a cultural hegemony. I talk about the hegemony of faith, that hegemony. Gramsci had always talked about this hegemony. Gramsci talked about how groups are included from the dominant culture. We talk about what's the dominant culture, but they help to set culture in society. We talk about the culture in Jamaica. You know what to call and talk about overlapping of culture. So you have to study people like Gramsci and so on. So this is what these people are working. CLR James and many people from the post-colonial school that are influenced by Hegel, Marx, Gramsci. I don't know if you guys study these people. Talk about Gramsci, Karl Marx, Hegel. Those people are influenced. These people influence Caribbean thinkers. These people influence Caribbean thinkers of the nationalist Pan-Africanist school. That is why it was very important for me to play that. And I'm probably going to ask you a question in the exam about Jacobins or CLR James from this study and who influenced him and what were some of the main principles of the ideologies of the people who influenced him. Okay, so this was important. Now, as I wrap up this presentation, I'm going to wrap this up because there is something happening in news. I'm going to put this into context. And this class is going to end. I need you guys, we started a little bit late. We started 30 minutes late. So, and I need at least 20 minutes to wrap up. So I need you guys to give me some time. Now, some of you are supposed to do homework. I don't know how many of you did the reading for this week. So I'm going to send you the homework and it's going to be probably to interact with the reading that you were supposed to do. But also you guys, some of you are supposed to put yourself in group, do a blog. That paper that group 3 wrote, I am going to publish that as an editorial article. But if you guys probably may want to respond to some of the questions that I asked, I could probably beef it up a bit. But that's going to be a blog and it's going to be written by all you guys in the group. But as I said, you need to develop a blog for yourselves or a podcast and so on and so forth. But for now, think about the group name. But there is something happening in the news, and I'm going to end with that. I'm sorry, not end with that, but I'm going to comment on that major news. It's very important that I comment on it. It's very important that I comment on that. You guys were supposed to read it. There is a major news in Haiti. And I interviewed Brian Concanon. Let's put this right here. And let's put this over here. Recently, I interviewed Brian Concanon for the podcast, The Neoliberal Round. Little did I know that there was a situation that he is involved with as a human rights advocate on Haitian justice and democracy. Brian is the executive director for the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti. It's a US-based human rights agency that is actively involved in working here in the US, advocate for the Haitians. While conducting the interview, I learned that the US, through Canada, is actively pressuring CARICOM to intervene in the Haitian crisis since the assassination of the Haitian president, Moise, in October of 2022. The US has since installed a prime minister that Haitians oppose, and this has created internal conflicts, especially against the US-backed prime minister, who is calling for the US to intervene despite the objections of Haitians. Please don't leave, guys. I want you guys to give me about 15 minutes to wrap up. Mr. Concanon shared a letter from a human rights and advocacy group in Haiti, written by Maria Joseph, the managing attorney to CARICOM. The letter, written November 22, stated, it was written to Dr. Carla, the Secretary General of the Caribbean Community, says, we are writing you in relation to the armed international intervention in Haiti that has been requested by Dr. Ariel Henry, the de facto Prime Minister of Haiti, and supported by the United States and Canada, to explain that any support for the intervention by the Caribbean community would violate CARICOM's democratic principles, betray Haitians' century-long struggle for democracy and sovereignty, and implicate CARICOM in attacks against civilians exercising their basic human rights. Ever since the intervention was proposed, Haitians have taken to the streets by the tens of thousands to oppose it. We have issued statements, spoken out in the media, and done anything else we could to let the world know that the intervention is designed to prop up the unconstitutional, corrupt, and repressive de facto government and stifle legitimate dissent. Now, the de facto Prime Minister, Henry, ascended to his post, not through any Haitian procedure, but through an announcement by the US-led core group. He had been nominated by President Jovenel Moïse of the party Haitian Bloc, the PHTK, whose mandate had expired 5 months previously. The PHTK has not run an election that was either fair or timely in the decade it has maintained power. Haiti's parliament became inoperative in January of 2020, and the term of all local elected officials ended in July of that year. So on and so forth. You guys can read the article, read the letter. That's available. This is gonna be available. You can watch the broadcast and the interview I did. But I wrapped this up by, he ended the letter by saying the Haitian people are today looking to CARICOM to extend the example the community set in 2004, not betray it. We do not want our CARICOM sisters and brothers to come with guns to help powerful countries impose a repressive regime on us. We want our sisters and brothers to come in solidarity with respect and democratic. We want CARICOM to once again insist that the international community stop supporting an unconstitutional imposed regime and allow Haitians to find a democratic, sustainable solution to our political crisis. And that was written by the managing editor of the organization. And I said further, I learned during the interview that the US and Canada have been trying to get an intervention force to Haiti since October. Haitians, for the most part, oppose it, and the US and Canada don't want their troops leading attacks against popular resistance. So they have been trying to get Caribbean countries to lead the mission. However, the optics of this is still one of master and slave, one that resembles using house slaves or black whippers to whip or beat the field slave. In response, St. Vincent Prime Minister, Mr. Gonsalves, rejected it in November of last year. But just Wednesday of this week, Jamaica expressed interest. Yet many Jamaicans are also opposed. And the recent Jamaica Gleaner allusion. And I said probably it was an amazing interview. The IJDH is working to bring about justice and democracy in Haiti. And for them it is, and for Brian, this is important. It is not intervention through force that is necessary. It is not intervention through force that is necessary. It is working with the Haitians in a supportive way that empowers them and value their realization of the nation, that values their realization of the nation. Not intervention, which is tantamount to invasion. He has been involved with promoting awareness about the injustices in Haiti and initiatives to improve international policy for the Haitians. Brian is an American citizen who has worked with the United Nations in Haiti, who decided to come back to the US to work for the Haitians as he realized that the work needs to be done in the global north, where decisions are made. Again, he decided to come back to the US. It's an organization that he was working with the United Nations in Haiti. But he decided that the work needs to be done. The work needs to be done where decisions are made, and that's here in the US, here in the global north, in the post-industrial. And that's why he's here. That's very important. We talk about Bamnarex. That structural adjustment involve transfer of decision making from local hands, from the global south to the global north, from the global south to the global north. And we see what's going on with Haiti today, and the fact that the constant penetration from without, in fact that even now they're seeking the help of Caribbean. What do you guys think? Do you guys think Jamaica should send troops? What are your feelings about Jamaica considering to send acquiesce to the US and Canada and send troops to Haiti? What are your feelings? What do you guys think about that?
Quite honestly, sir, all right, well, my view, the soldiers, the type of training, the comprehensive training, mentally, emotionally, and physically that the JDF and the JCF candidates are receiving now has seriously diminished in terms of the quality. So I don't believe we would stand a chance mentally.
Wait, hold up. So wait, you're telling me that even within our own, how are we able to send people to Haiti when our resources are depleted? Unless the Americans are going to support the mission, they're going to pay us to send people there. What if they pay us to send people there?
That wouldn't be enough, sir, because, all right, let's say that we get the resources, we get the weapon, the tech and the weaponry and so on and so forth. I don't think that the Jamaican soldiers have the metal, because as a whole, we have been blessed by God to not even have civil war. What we have is really extreme violence that has increased the murder rate annually, but we don't have that conditioning to really fight a war. These people are born and bred, it's almost genetic. So what are we going there to do? The Jamaican law enforcement can barely hold their own against the infidels in our country. I don't think we're going to survive. So I think that we should not send any Jamaicans, because we'll be doing it to their detriment. We'll be sending them to their deaths.
How many persons agree with Hanif? Do we all agree that Jamaica should not consider it? And is there anybody in the class that does not agree, who thinks that we should send people? We should, or we have to send some. We should acquiesce to the Americans and to the Canadians. We should send people there. How many persons? Anybody that disagree with disagree? So you all think that we should not interfere in Haiti? What solutions? I mean, what can we do? How can we help the people in Haiti and what's going on in Haiti? Is there any?
Sir, I'm going to speak on the, I don't know if you want to say natural remedies, but because you're a theologian, sir, I have to speak on this, and it's my view, of course, but it is critical thinking. I believe that Haiti is in part where it's at now because they have voodoo as their main religion. And as a theologian and as a pastor, the word of God says, the people who know their God shall do exploits.
Wait, stop. I don't know if voodoo is not their main religion.
So it has changed?
No, it's not. It's probably, we have Obia, they have voodoo, but people think that Obia is Jamaica's main religion. That's not true. It's no way I do the same thing by thinking that, of course, I mean, there are people that practice voodoo, but they have several different religions. So, I mean, they have Christian. I mean, the president of JTS was Dr. Jemem Nawalise. He's from Haiti. They have a very strong Christian tradition in Haiti. So, no, it's not just, but they practice. So no, it's not. So it's not fair to say that. Okay.
Okay. So I'm correcting. So what I think we should do, we should send every other type of aid except security. We're not equipped. So we could send the basics like food items, apparel, medicinal supplies, and we should send the psychological aid for those who are mentally and emotionally traumatized from the civil unrest. Send social workers, send evangelists, send missionaries, that kind of thing. but leave the security out of it. We're not equipped.
What about from a policy level? What can the CARICOM do? Like what would CARICOM, and what about CARICOM in terms of, because we are part of CARICOM, and there's also the Organization of American States, which is also part of an organization that also works on democracy, promoting democracy, and engagements between countries and so on. So promote geopolitical issues in the world, much like the CARICOM, which many people, when I spoke with Brian, he believes that OAS is probably it's like a Democrat versus a Republican kind of a thing, you know. OAS is there to oppose CARICOM, or OAS it's a dinosaur in the room, in a sense. The dinosaur and CARICOM togetherness and CARICOM integration. But what can CARICOM do? What must CARICOM do as it relates to the Haitian? Is there anything that CARICOM can do?
Yes, sir. What I believe, okay, we are in a very sensitive time when it comes to nationalism and policy and so on and so forth. We have democracy versus communism. But if you look at what nation leading and nation building should be, it should be fair. CARICOM needs to give the people their voice. Communism robs the people of their voice to an extent, while democracy has become kind of like hypocrisy. So we need to do what's fair, give the people the media to express themselves before initiating policies. Listen, and hopefully, of course, the controversy with that is that persons may not be honest, but we're hoping that the government and the people can sit around the table of negotiation with CARICOM, be completely vulnerable and transparent, and then from there, we have a kind of counseling approach. Rather than tell them what to do, they're the ones who are going to be living with the policies in their culture that has been established for possibly millennia. So we have to say, okay, area grosses. What isn't working that has been established that you're currently using? Can it be used? Throw it away. If not, if it can be used, let's repair it. Don't fix what's broken. And how are all these three realities going to lead to the development, the future development of this nation? And then from there, not CARICOM, but CARICOM along with the citizens of the country and the government make the policies. And that is going to be, in my view, an ongoing process, because first you have to cool tempers. You have to be fair to persons and allow them the space and the time to express their distress, even from the governmental level. And then when all of the tensions have been eased, then we can sit down and say, make policies. But don't enter telling people what to do. Listen to what they are experiencing.
And the people from Haiti, they have experienced, and the people in the Caribbean have always been told what to do. And there's always complex, this inferiority complex, and they're fighting for independence. Now, I'm going to wrap up. I see your raised hand, and probably all of you should maybe write a paper in response to what's going on in Haiti. But this is important as we think about what's going on in Jamaica as well. But Haiti, as I said to you, debt was an issue. There was, Haiti was made an example. Haiti cannot be an example of. Haiti wasn't supposed to be successful, because if Haiti gets independent and they become successful, then all other Black people, that it changes the narrative. And in a sense, you get that. So since they're independent and since the revolution and their freedom, one of the oldest Black nations, and so they have been struggling in terms of that, in the former colonized countries that have been free, on the first and eldest, they've been struggling. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to say, I'm going to end with something very powerful. By the way, I did an article about, is Guyana, what must the Caribbean look to? If the Caribbean is to reinvent itself, does Guyana's oil, does it provide any answer? And you can read the article. Probably I can read it later on. But I'm going to wrap this up. This whole
I think
lecture.
you should take Mary's point first and then wrap up, sir.
All right, Mary, what's that?
Good night, sir.
Good night.
My say with the Haiti crisis, as a Caribbean people and as a CARICOM country, I think all the CARICOM countries should come together and try to assist them in their government system, because it would be unfair for somebody in the US they should put somebody from the US there to be, say, their prime minister. Why should CARICOM allow the Americans to come in and install a prime minister there? It would be like back in the colonial system, the slave.
I mean,
The Americans want to take over. So I think as a Caribbean country and as a Caribbean people, they should come together and assist the Haitian in that region. Not to send soldiers there to be over them as it was in the slave master days, but help them in their government system, as in a prime minister.
yes, yes.
And don't allow the Americans to come in that category.
Very true. I mean, we wouldn't want anybody to invade Jamaica. We wouldn't want the Americans
So, sir,
to.
we wouldn't want that, sir. We wouldn't
Definitely.
want America to come and invade here.
Definitely, you know.
You know,
But yeah,
so
I'm
that's
gonna wrap.
my view, sir.
And I appreciate that, Mary. I'm going to wrap this up. As we talk about what is the Caribbean and what is the Caribbean in the past, in and the present, I'm going to wrap. The film Life and Death is what we're going to be getting into next. When we come back next class, we'll watch it. The beginning of the class, we will watch that. But this is the wrap up of this week. Stemming from what we said, how we ended last week. I said that if you guys watch the summary, I don't need to go back over this. It says the Caribbean represents a people who have been disrupted, detached, displaced, hybridized, and made into dependent capitalists with some level of modernity to promote consumption within the neoliberal globalized world. A world which is largely a consumer society. Needless to say, the Caribbean remains vulnerable and open to penetration from without, and exogenous shocks from within. And is recreated, the Caribbean is recreated within the mold and frame of its former masters, since decolonization. These former masters are now landlords within the newly created, globalized world, where freed men now pay rent. They are now landlords within the newly created, globalized world, where free men now pay rent. This is the condition of the Caribbean and the world since decolonization and the drive for a post-colonial world, where the Caribbean had a dream of nations of freed men who were sovereign of their own lives, met a neoliberal globalized world in the 1970s and beyond, where nationalists succumbed to denationalization of the nation so as to free up globalization. This was a type of globalization, neoliberal globalization, that ultimately continued a strategy of Pharisaicism, now defined in the 20th century as the bureaucratic phenomenon, where established rules were made through arrangements only governed the new nations and freed people, but the old masters and their new elitist friends of the Washington Consensus were largely above those rules. As for them, the law is not a shackle. Only those who are within a particular dynamic of life and society. The question of what is anything is a question about life. requiring an investigation about what is true about reality. Life is what people make it and make of it. When we speak of life, we are talking about the experience of what is, or the reality of the experience of those who give meaning to the existence of life through the lived experiences of life in spaces and places. The meaning of those who give meaning to it, those who give meaning to it. The essence of life comes from the relationships between and among peoples. The essence of life comes from the relationships between and among peoples, so that we have determined that life is not just what people make it, but that life is about people and how they relate within that man-made space. However, Fanon, the Marxist psychiatrist, anarchist from the colony of Algeria, now independent, argued in Wretched in his psychoanalysis of the black and brown colonized man, that their depersonalization, the stripping away of the man, was done in order that they could be subdued within the dynamic of life, What is life then in reality of truth, if man comes into the world with a thinking and an identity for him or her, as if the world was created from without, for them to occupy their stations without objection? But the world is created to serve interests. Whose interests? Man or God? But God may be the invocation man has used to justify a space in the dynamic of life which had given rise to and maintained monarchies, nobilities, popes, wealthy rulers, posing as capitalists and Marxists, institutions, empires and peoples, privileges and positions. Therefore, the question of what is the Caribbean must also follow who is asking and or who determines this, the subject or the object. This is because the truth of anything is objectified within the subjective. The truth of anything is objectified within the subjective, usually the dominant view that defines purpose and reality of the thing being objectified. This is deep. Let me say this is deep. This is, the question is, therefore, the question of what is the Caribbean must also follow who is asking, and I said, who determines this, must also follow who is asking and or who determines it, the subject or the object. This is because the truth of anything is objectified within the subject, usually dominant, that defines the dominant. Frantz Fanon talked about the white supremacist belief, or we see that the Negro is not full stop any more than the white. Instead of saying the Negro isn't less than, he says we aren't more than. He changes the dynamic, he changes the positioning, he changes the reality. And I said, this is because the truth of anything is objectified within the subjective, usually the dominant view, supremacist belief that defines purpose and reality. It's the thing being objectified. If the colonized is depersonalized, then he is always in the objective. Again, if the colonized man, who is now post-colonial, who now meets neoliberal globalization and neo-capitalism, we're now through debt and other hegemonic cultural needs, okay, continue this violence of colonization. If the colonized is depersonalized, then he is always in the objective. He's always in the objective. What is the Caribbean? The Caribbean is a question from thinking about one's identity concerning a truth about some reality. However, can we know anything given the problem of arriving at truth? can we know anything with arriving at truth? And then that's when you talk about types of truth. There's a pragmatic truth, and pragmatic truth. Who uses pragmatic truth? That's more American theory of truth, the American concept of truth. What's the Caribbean concept of truth? What is the Indian concept? What is the Orientalist concept? But the American concept of truth, the pragmatic truth, that which corresponds with his understanding of what is going on right now. So the rain is falling only if he wants the rain to be falling. The pragmatist. Then there is a coherent theory of truth. And there are other methods, and the method of arriving at truth is the deductive method and the inductive method. But they are this class is not a logic class, but when you study logic and apologetics, there is the problem of logic. There's the problem of the problem of logic is the problem of the inductive and the deductive. Okay, no matter how many, he said all Jamaicans love curry, we're now later Jamaican, so therefore we're not like Jamaican. But guess what? I may love curry, but I may not be Jamaican. The logic may follow a particular standard, but guess what? Conclusion is still wrong. So there we talk about the problem of logic and the problem of truth. So therefore, this is because the truth of, and so I say to you towards the end here that what? However, can we know anything given the problem of arriving at truth? Also with Descartes and the idea of trying to find the reality of anything and how you find that. And we come to a close here. And knowledge. In fact, Descartes, continuing on this idea here, the father of phenomenology, asserts that we cannot truly know anything outside of our own minds, for sure. When he arrived at cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. I think therefore I am. Because when one denies his own reality, in order that one may begin to come to the truth of reality, he or she can't help but acknowledge the presence of one's mind that is thinking. Now this argument, though limited, as it does not provide any deeper understanding of totality, the total reality of life, is important to post-colonial studies and the question of what is. Why? Because it speaks to the realization of the person in coming to his own reality and understanding of self. The power of the individual mind and thinking to shape and realize his own reality and truth. Yet Fanon writes that the colonized man is depersonalized and a political creature whose idea of the self is estranged, divorced from him or her. But the question of what is the Caribbean also connects to a past, a present, and a future, and must consider where and when does the Caribbean history of the Caribbean and its peoples begin? The Taino people, Europeans, Africans. The dynamic we currently occupy comes from a history of struggle that has left the Caribbean with a new identity that is in tension. How far must we go in order to study the Caribbean, and why? When we study the Caribbean, we say we are studying diverse currents in the Caribbean. So then where do we start? With whom? Michael Manley. Manley himself was influenced by the current of polar between the dominant of the West and the East from a colonized world. He was accused of being a socialist, influenced by the thoughts of people like Fanon, critical thinkers of the post-colonial time. Do we begin with Edward Seaga, himself considered a foreigner? He wasn't born in Jamaica, was considered a foreigner by his own countrymen, who either led the biggest garrison, who was the father of Reaganomics and Thatcherism in Jamaica. But he was of the Adam Smith School, trained at an Ivy League. But these dynamic political figures were cogs within a wider dynamic in society. If you were to look at some Caribbean states today, it represents this tension, violence, and theft. Where are the Taino people who once lived, toiled, and controlled regions of the Caribbean? Where are they? In Jamaica, the natives were wiped out by Christopher Columbus and the Europeans, which we celebrate as discoverers and innovators. But if we are to be accurate, they must only be hailed as thieves, murderers who stole land and then enshrined laws that protect their ill-gotten wealth. Today, indigenous peoples like those American Indians and the natives of Brazil lack much agency from robbers who possess their lands, who are creeping more and more into their protected and agreed upon. The world today provides a picture of violence, including theft and murder. Slaves in Africa were not immune from this either. The Europeans, after they extracted people from Africa through an elaborate strategy of trickery, they went back and dominated Africa, plundering peoples and cities, stealing resources and culture as their own, and even set up nations within the foreign lands as their own. The damage done to the colonizer and its effects on him and his continued subjugation leaves a legacy of dismemberment, an ambivalence in his human being, which estranged him from his individuality. But those who had given meaning to what we have as a society today, or what we imagine it to be, thought it a beautiful and the most appropriate thing to order society within such an inhumane and Manchian way, viewing men as machines. Plato in his Republic had envisioned a life ordered as a hierarchy, everything in their place, while functionalist sociologists had extended that to theorize a perfect society based on value judgments that prioritize systems over disorder, which is the drive of those who act outside of society's rules and confinements that restrict personhood and individuality. So the Caribbean, as part of the totality of life, must critically reflect on its position in relation to life and society, because life is about people and how people relate within that dynamic. And it is people that make life what it is. The relationships within life is facilitated by communication, the progression of life, which is dynamic. The relationship within life is facilitated by communication, which facilitates the progression of life, which is dynamic and seem to always be in tension between groups of peoples created by the idea of race and class to sustain this violent dynamic. So as I wrap up this lecture, I ask, is there anything such as the Caribbean thought or such as Caribbean thought? Thought is not dinosauric. It is not. Thought is not a dinosaur or static, as it is dynamic and critical. And that's when you go to start reading about critical thinking. What have Caribbean thinking? What have Caribbean thinkers contributed to this world order? And what are they saying now, especially in this neoliberal world that has been penetrated by populism and this renewed sense of indifference and revival of fascism? Again, let me ask you guys this question. You guys, is there anything, so having said that, is there anything such as Caribbean thought? Thought is not dinosaur or static, as it is dynamic and critical. Hence, what have Caribbean thinking in mind? What have Caribbean thinkers contributed to this world order, And what are they saying now, especially in this neoliberal world that has been penetrated by Trumpism, populism, and this renewed sense of indifference and revival of fascism? I taught the course Caribbean Thought at Jamaica about 10 minutes. It was originally developed by Reverend Dr. Garnet. This course will benefit from my work in neoliberalism. What are your thoughts on the idea of Caribbean thinking, and how effective and influential is this thinking in shaping not just Caribbean life, but life in the diaspora? What contributions or impact have thinkers of Caribbean thought impressed on past and current affairs on the global stage, and will it bear any relevance for tomorrow, given the region's level of economic independence? And I just talked about CLR James, George Padmore. You can read more about those guys. Do your own research, Marcus Garvey. Nevertheless, religion is an important feature in the Caribbean. Religion. Is it to its detriment? This is important. Religion is an important feature in the Caribbean. Is it to its detriment? And what of the individual and its economic competitiveness within neoliberal globalism? Our competitiveness, given our monolithic and dynamic and Judeo-Christian influence and masculine posture. Okay? Caribbean thought contends with and asks the question, is the Caribbean an invention of the 21st century? And if it is, must it not be reinterpreted and transcended? And how can we do that? By recapturing our own and capitalizing on opportunity that is revolutionary and make for competition. We further make the point that the Caribbean must be seen as a collective, yet the Caribbean's unity is haphazard, not strategically targeted and effective. The Caribbean is an interdependent set of people who need to now recapture and reinterpret themselves by revisiting their history and being objective about it so as to then produce that which is unique to them. What is quite true is that the Caribbean's inability to chart their own course since decolonization and realize real political independence and economic potential. What voice do they have as Caribbean thinkers? What are the threats to that voice? What are the threats to Caribbean in opposing the US from them acquiescing to them going to Haiti? Are Caribbean countries truly free of the, so yes, they shouldn't go, but are Caribbean countries truly free of the external? And this illusion of freedom comes within competing worldviews. What of the issue of bias? And of course, we utilize Kenneth Clark's book, Dark Ghetto, Dilemmas of Social Power, to help us distill some of the concepts and explore the questions and our thoughts. We reference these concepts and discussions in the book Neoliberalism. And we have already delved into these. Now, I'm going to stop right here because it's become, and I think that's where I'm going to stop. Because we're supposed to go, the next thing we go into now is, what is the difference between neoliberalism and neoliberalism? And I say there is a difference between liberalism and neoliberalism. Liberalism was was the humanist ideology promoting individualism and free will. It was a social theory within the humanity. However, liberalism, like all useful things, doctrines or things became adopted and was adapted within another economy due to its usage and normalization within the corporate industry by capitalists and the large corporations. We're gonna pick up from this show. When we're gonna come back, we're gonna watch the film first. We're gonna watch Life and Death. I'm gonna show it on here. You guys, if you can get access to it and review it, go ahead. But I want you guys for the homework is just to get a review this piece talking about CLR James. Go back to it, review it, and do a reflection on it. If group 2 answered a group question, if the other groups have not submitted any piece of work, tell me what question you're going to do and submit an introduction to your group. I love what group 2 did, man. That was great. Takes care of all the work that I have to give you guys. But I want you guys to interact with what's going on in Haiti today, with the story I'm working on, but also with the piece I played on CLR James as a Caribbean thinker, who is very influential, who is very important. He's from Trinidad, but that's fine. But he's from Trinidad, but he talks about Haiti. Next week, you're going to have to interact with the film Life and Death. That will be graded. Okay, that will definitely be graded. The Life and Death piece of work, and that will be part of your midterm grade. Okay, that's for next week. But for now, rewatch and you get a chance. This class will be available, so you get a chance to rewatch it. Listen to some of the points I made. The last half of it was a lecture wrapping up the laying of the foundation, putting it into perspective. And of course, as we move into the next level, what we're going to do is we're going to now watch the film Life and Death, and because that's powerful. That's when you're going to really get into the course. When we watch Life and Death, we're going to watch the film Life and Death, then watch the book Corruption, then get into Bob Marley's Religious Consciousness, Who Shot the Sheriff. That's great. And of course, we have the 4 speakers that are going to be coming to talk about the film. When we have Bob Marley here, we're going to also have Reverend Richard Beckford talking about theology. What is theology? Looking at how Reverend Garnet Wolper defined theology, and then sexual identity, going to have Reverend Hewitt Holmes come and talk about it, but that's not until later on, okay? And the other guests. But for now, we're going to transition into the movie, into the film, Life and Death, and Corruption, and Bob Marley, Who Shot the Sheriff. Those 3 films are very important. That's what we're going to do next. Those 3 films, Life and Death, Cost of Corruption, Who Shot the Sheriff. Those 3 films are what we have. Okay, make a note of that. The second thing is, and you can do the reflection in your group work. I'm going to end this by saying, and Christine, you have a question, but this is the last thing I'm going to say. Edward Seaga wrote a paper and it was published. And it's just 1 minute. It's a 1 minute thing, and excerpt, an abstract. It's called, Edward Seaga, it's called A Model of Development for the Middle Level Country. And it's a lecture that he gave. I think it was at Howard University or something, I'm not sure. But it's available. It's called A Model, I'll email it to you, A Model of Development for the Middle Level Country, written by Edward Seaga in New Directions, Volume 10, Issue 3, 1983. Listen to what he said in the beginning, and I'm just a little section. He said, in the final analysis, all democratic governments are committed to improving the quality of life and range of opportunity of the people they represent. All, again, in the final analysis, all democratic governments are committed to improving the quality of life and range of opportunity of the people they represent. But to do so, to achieve those goals of broad humanitarian development, to which wisdom and compassion compel, we must examine with detachment the strategies which give us the greatest chance of successfully reaching them. We must examine with detachment the strategy which give the greatest chance of success. The greatest chance of success. The greatest chance of successfully reaching. In the final analysis, all democratic governments are committed to improving the quality of life and range of opportunity of the people they represent. But to do so, to achieve those goals of broad humanitarian development, to which wisdom and compassion compel us, we must examine with detachment the strategies which give us the greatest chance of successfully reaching. And this is from Edward Seaga, former Prime Minister of Jamaica. And this was from a lecture. Powerful. This is the lecture for today. And Michael Manley is going to tell you that as well. And they're going to tell you that their hands were tied. But yet still, he had a garrison. This was great. This is quite, as I study this and I interviewed and the class has ended. And you guys and both persons might not, if you guys want to end, you can go. But I want to, this is, as I think about the class and think about what's going on in society, what's going on with the Caribbean, it's quite powerful. He said, Ryan said to me, Ronaldo, you're part of the resistance. And yes, I am part of the resistance. Because I am part of the change. And I saw what CLR dreamed and what my people before us did. What are we now doing in the future? And what can we learn and what from the mistake? Group 2 says, Pan-Africanism has not realized its ultimate goal. So the fight, the struggle continues, and colonization or colonialism has evolved in more sophisticated ways. That is why you have to constantly study and look at how control and power and colonization and how that has evolved and how we can launch an effective response through strategy. And we cannot, and if we live in a competitive world, and if the people from below want to get ahead in life, and if social movements, we have to come together, the Caribbean have to come together. That is what has bothered. And the inability to sacrifice, to give up. Jesus gave up some of his deity. Well, some of the Caribbean prime ministers and leaders gave up some of their powers and in order to form a unity. Will they give up some of the benefits in the short term in order to reposition Caribbean in the long run? Because maybe we are looking in the short run, we have to look in the long run. Cuba tried to go it alone. That's the problem. Cuba was doing it alone, and many people didn't come to their aid because we're afraid. What if Caribbean come together with Guyana's oil and Trinidad's oil and Jamaica's bauxite? You know, if these countries come together, what? That's what has dogged us, and look what's going on in Haiti today. The U.S. should not be coming to us to tell us we at the CARICOM level should be actively involved in discussions about and if you look at, I talk about Aristide and what happened. I learned more about Aristide because I said to him he was a house slave. But when you study what happened with Aristide was abducted, according to Brian Concanen, by the U.S. And there are many politicians and people who he was abducted by international people who wanted to make an exam. You know what? Aristide was studying. Jean Bertrand Aristide was a lawyer, was an attorney, and he was prime minister or president of Haiti. And I made some accusations, which I'm going to take back, about John. You know what he was doing? He was trying to sue France. He was before the international court. He went before France, and he was trying to build a case as an attorney to put before the international community to say build a case against France, illegitimacy, and France's claims of debt. He was trying to get back all the monies that Haiti was paying to France. That's what Jean Bertrand Aristide was doing. And can I tell you, that's a problem. If he was successful in doing that, it means that France would have to give back their money. And guess what? Not only France, but all the European countries and the US and all the former colonial countries, yes, that were engaged in slavery and certain kind of discrimination, it would have set a precedent. You talk about precedent. So when you talk about legal issues, when decisions are made in a court of law, it sets a precedent. No, Mary, wait. This is important, man. Okay, we'll pick this up later, but this is important. Final point. Aristide was, if you know about Jean Bertrand Aristide, the former president of Haiti, and CARICOM was really working with Haiti and bringing democracy in Haiti, and CARICOM was very engaged in the 2000s, in the early part of the 2000s. And I remember I followed that because I graduated from JT in 2003. I was very involved reading about what was going on in Haiti and how CARICOM was leading the charge. But you know what was also going on in Haiti? This prime minister, and he was trying to do it alone. Trying to build a case. They abducted him, and the next thing you know, that story was gone. And maybe the other Haitians didn't understand what Aristide was doing. Communication, you have to communicate with others what you're doing, with others on your side in the Caribbean. Because he's building a case. And it looked like he can win the argument about the reparation, giving back slaves and Haitians their money that and then he's gonna set a precedent. And that's what you see what happened with, and you talk about Black people can't marry, which I wrote an article, Black people can't marry. As soon as they're about to take off, as soon as something about to happen, there's always some conflict, some chaos, something that's happening. But anyway, this is when you study the Haitian story, it's quite interesting. It's also part of studying the Caribbean situation. Cuba was an example. Cuba is made an example in the world today. You know what happened? So Haiti is an example of, okay, but Cuba is an example of when you try to adopt and to apply a governance that's not American or Western. That's what happened. They were made an example. They have embargo and all of that. That's what happened. When you don't subscribe to the external mold and subscribe to the rule that they create, and those rules are created to keep you down, then they create embargoes then to keep you down. If you won't subscribe to the rules and to the laws and to keep you down, then they create rules and embargoes and other stuff to keep you down, to make an example of you. This is powerful. This is a powerful course. That's it for class today. We will probably do a summary of this. We'll do some summary. And the summary will maybe to just read the last half of the class, or to probably maybe this particular one. Maybe we will have a summary. Maybe we won't. We may not have a summary for this week's class, or maybe I may summarize the argument that I just read. So on and so forth. But thank you so much. Now, Christine had a question. Mary had a question, and then Christine, I'm sorry, your hand was up. What were you trying to say, Mary? Christine.
Sorry, you answered the question already, sir. It's okay.
What was the question? I'm curious. Okay, fine. I answered it. Kevin and Chantel, thank you. Daniel, Patrice, Janet, Tamar, Jason, Mary, Hanif, Karan, Dana Lee, Christine, thank you so much for being part of the resistance and staying until what time it is? 9:52.
You're welcome, sir.
I really appreciate you guys. And I just really hope that we can work together. When we're finished with this class, we have a dynamic class where you guys, have blogs and podcasts. And, you guys, when you submit your articles, I'm going to publish them. Group 2 article, I'm going to publish it. It needs to be edited and reformatted. And if there's any other argument you want, I'm going to publish it, okay? And if you want, and maybe I could do a podcast with Group 2, one of these days, interviewing you about your paper, what you're writing about, what the experience writing this and so on. And probably, I want to do interviews with some of you about, I want to do interviews with some of you, learn about you, and I want you guys to develop expression and be, just be powerful.
Sir?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, the sessions, will it be graded? The mere fact that we are up and beyond with you, sir?
Of course, man. That's why sometimes, when I go back to watch the recording, all of it. So this is, I can see who is here. I see who is in the class.
I can concur that everyone will pass, sir.
I don't want to tell you guys that you're going to pass in the next it's like give homework, come to class. I don't want to start. I don't like to think it's going to pass and fail. I don't like to think. If you notice, I'm part of the resistance.
No, I want to know if you set your exam.
Yes, I have set the exam question already. I'm just brushing it up to submit to.
You set your exam question already, sir?
I've set the exam already, and some of it comes from.
Send us in advance. Send us in advance, sir.
This class is being recorded. This class is being recorded, so we won't talk about it. Okay. All right, but probably I can. Any questions? Okay, the class is over, but if you guys have any questions and you guys can take next minute and you have a question, something burning that you guys want to ask me, go ahead. You can do that. No, you guys can do that. Anybody here that's not in a group, reach out to Chantel. She's in charge of the group. She's my assistant. And, I need to bless people who are supporting me like Chantel. God continue to bless me so I could bless these people, So we will talk about that later. And the previous classes, there are some people that helped me that I'm going to bless. And I'm going to give God thanks for them. But anyways, reach out to Chantel.
Sorry. You said blessed.
Okay.
What is the blessed?
I'm speaking general to little, but I just want to tell you guys that continue to follow the neoliberal.com. Follow the RonaldoCMcKenzie.com. I have a lot of the commentaries and stuff that are in there. And I'm gonna go and look. What I'm gonna do this week, I'm gonna spend some time reviewing the groups and looking at the groups and looking at reviewing the emails to people who have been interacting with me and sending emails, looking at the piece of work that you submitted. Some of you are submitting work, so I get to know some of you and how you work. That's great. Some of you still haven't submitted anything. So submit something, submit an idea. I mean, you know what? Submit a paper summarizing the class. You know, I do it. I used to, when I was at Penn, my first master, every time class ended in one of the anthropology classes I did, each student had to summarize the class. About 7 of us or 10 of us in the class. And every time a student goes to the class, and when we're finished with the class, then the night before the lecture, 12 o'clock before the lecture the next day, the student that is responsible for summarizing have to email the summary of the class, of the main points to the students. That's something I should, because I've been doing it. What I do, I try to summarize the main arguments and send it out to you guys. But maybe you guys could try and do that. You know, watch the video.
Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. So when a student, like, you know, every week they probably have somebody else to summarize. So you're going to bless those people as well?
With grades? There are many ways we bless people, but with academical stuff, it's different. But Chantel is my assistant in the class. She's accepted that position and she's doing a great work. And if you need any assistance, reach out to her. I read her email religiously. Oh, that her email is the first email I check, trust me. But then we are also in WhatsApp group. That's what you guys all have access to. Thank you guys so much. I pray that you guys will have a great week. That God will inspire you. Whatever needs you have, tell him. Whatever needs you have, tell God what you need. And let him know how whatever you need will help advance the kingdom and how it does not privilege you to make you look better than other people. I didn't know that, hey, I'm not trying to build myself so that I can look good for God. I'm asking you to bless me so that I can bless you. You know, I'm writing a book on secrets to unlocking the life. And that's one of the things I talk. You know, and I talk about experience. When you pray, when you seek God intervention, God will intervene. I'm telling you, it's powerful. And just remember, there's life and death in the court. Okay? And if you truly are in tune and connected with that need, and that need is not a need that promotes you over others, and that need is not born and birthed in selfishness, pride, and greed, and that need will promote and make God. Yes? I'm telling you, pray those specific pride. What exactly do you need to have? And probably within 15 minutes, God maybe will handle that. So I pray, whatever need you have right now, that you will bring it to God, and that God will realize. Sometimes he speaks to us in ways that he's answering the prayers in a way. He's pushing us to the prayer that we're praying. So I pray that each of us, you will be blessed, and that this class will be so dynamic that you have great papers and something great work that will publish. When I publish them, somebody will see it and they'll be so intrigued by it. It will become the talk of the town, talk of the world, and will promote you and the dynamic work that you are hoping to do, bring about positivity in the world, especially among the oppressed. May you be empowered to empower others. May you be inspired to inspire others. And may this course help to facilitate change and the inspiration we all need in order to help the Caribbean and those who are constantly oppressing the world and who are oppressed through systems and evolved systems. Well, this is the Danilo Brown podcast. You will be joining by a podcast or watching by a delayed video. May God bless you.
All right, sir.